Chapter 1892, Peak Holy Lord. Chapter 1892, Peak Holy Lord. Within the cocoon, Lin Ming experienced a long, long dream. In this dream, he witnessed a great calamity sweep through cosmos. The scale of this great calamity was far more terrifying than the invasion of God race by the saints. It was one that affected nearly every race in every universe. He saw demons rampaging, he saw countless lives perishing, trillions of quadrillions of miles of space being wiped clean of life as great worlds were destroyed one after another. This horror of this calamity even changed the rules of the heavenly Tao. It caused some universes within the 33 heavens to be annihilated of civilization, turned to wilderness. And this era was the era in which the Asura Road Master and the creator of the Holy Scripture lived. Lin Ming seemed to pass through 10 billion years of time to witness all of this. There were blurred fragments, but the scenes within left Lin Ming shocked beyond comprehension. Those dreadful devils overwhelmed the skies. The worst amongst them were holy lords, and there were countless additional World King and Great World King demons. Not just that, but there were numerous Empyrean level and true divinity level demons. The greatest powerhouses of the ancient races fiercely warred with these demons, exhausting all of their energy. Many races were completely exterminated. But for humans, saints, and spiriters, during this time they were still small races. Through virtue of their weakness they survived and multiplied, slowly seizing the 33 heavens and developing their own martial arts civilization. The accumulated wisdom of the universe declined, but rose again and began to vigorously flourish. This process was like the alternating pattern of life and death. Glory was life, destruction was death. Lin Ming felt that without a doubt, the scenes he saw were memories within the drop of blood. These demons, are they the so-called abyssal devils? The primeval realm that stands separate from the 33 heavens, could it be the entrance connecting the abyss and the 33 heavens? This explanation was the most reasonable. The primeval realm was likely to be the entrance to the abyss, thus it wasn't able to be destroyed. This was why it remained for 10 billion years, eventually becoming a ruin. The boundless universe, all lives in the cosmos, the civilization of martial arts. In this world, nothing can escape the samsara of life and death. Life and death laws are the most common laws in the universe. They are everywhere. If so, then can the law of eternal life really exist? All sorts of thoughts flashed through Lin Ming's mind. Unconsciously, he saw his mortal body slowly fuse together with the blood cocoon, gradually transforming. On the surface of the blood cocoon, innumerable runes appeared. They faintly circulated with a bright light, emitting a dense rosy glow. This scene continued for an unknown period of time. At a certain moment, the Asura laws within the mirror world began to gather together. These law fragments formed a giant vortex that funneled into the blood cocoon. At the same time, in the blood cocoon, the Asura blood within Lin Ming began to resonate with the Asura heavenly Tao laws. Hum. A dreadful sound reverberated outwards. From time to time, black scales appeared on Lin Ming's body and then hid themselves again. His joints emitted crackling explosive sounds as if the Asura blood within him was violently clashing with the blood of the Holy Scripture creator. The two different bloodlines waged war with each other, nearly taking Lin Ming's body as their battlefield. An agonizing pain echoed through Lin Ming like a tide. His flesh and blood tore apart again and again, collapsing and disintegrating. A massive amount of blood leaked out, flowing into the cocoon. At that moment, it was like Lin Ming's body was soaked within a blood pond. However, even watching his body being ruined, Lin Ming's heart was as still as placid water, without any panic at all. This was similar to the deep meanings of the life and death laws. To break something down and then reform it. Without experiencing destruction, how could one experience new life? As for those endless waves of pain, Lin Ming relied on his willpower to endure every last bit of it. Thus, even in such a situation he was able to remain in an ethereal condition. His cultivation rapidly rose. He instantly broke past the barrier of the late Holy Lord realm. But, his cultivation continued to dramatically increase. His mortal body continued to break down, until even white bone was exposed. Lin Ming only staunchly defended his inner world and spiritual sea, allowing his mortal body to undergo all of these transformations and allowing the two surging energies within him to continue washing away his meridians. He believed that these two strengths within him would inevitably fuse together. Otherwise, wouldn't the Azura Roadmaster have left behind a death trap in his forbidden land instead of a reward? If his successor who inherited the Azura Heavenly Tao legacy was to obtain this drop of blood from the creator of the Holy Scripture, would it really be poison? The pain of fusion continued for a long time. Lin Ming's flesh and blood, and even the black scales, slowly rotted away, scorched black until they finally fell off. But beneath this ruined flesh and blood was new flesh and blood, crystalline and pure white, like warm jade. 10 days passed. The Azura Heavenly Tao laws had completely gathered into the blood cocoon. And at this time, with a snapping sound, a visible crack presented itself on the surface of the blood cocoon. Di Wuhen and the others had been constantly keeping watch over the surroundings. As they noticed this change, they all turned to look. Lin Ming was emerging. The blood cocoon split a little at a time until it completely tore open. Within, Lin Ming was sitting down, drenched in blood and mucus. Feeling the aura of the outside laws, Lin Ming opened his eyes and slowly stood up. His clothing had already been completely destroyed, but his body was wrapped in the light of the great Tao laws. He looked like a blazing sun, making one unable to see him clearly. Has he already refined the blood? Di Wuhen muttered. He should have. It's really enough for anyone to feel envy. A complex look flashed into Barguet's eyes. While he didn't know which ancient peerless character had left behind this drop of blood, in terms of quality it had already completely surpassed the limits of his understanding. Such a lucky chance, how could he not envy it? At this time, the light of the great Tao condensed, forming into new clothes that draped over Lin Ming. Lin Ming's cultivation had unexpectedly risen to the peak Holy Lord realm. The blood of two existences that were beyond divinity had violently clashed within his body, the fallout causing Lin Ming's cultivation to rise to the late Holy Lord realm and break past it into the peak Holy Lord realm. Such a rapid pace of cultivation had never been experienced even by Lin Ming. Di Wuhen, Smokeless, Barguet, and the others were all left incomparably shocked. Peak Holy Lord. This is too fast. Even a genius often needs several hundred years to rise from the middle Holy Lord to peak Holy Lord realm. But to surpass two small boundaries all of a sudden, would that make his foundation unstable? Everyone wondered, worried. No matter which race, their geniuses always suppressed their cultivations to temper their comprehension of laws. Otherwise, if one's cultivation rose too quickly but their laws couldn't follow them, then the gains simply weren't worth the losses. For instance, take a martial artist that cultivated the fire laws. If they entered into the Holy Lord realm after comprehending the 6th level concept of fire as opposed to entering the Holy Lord realm after comprehending the 7th level concept of fire, the effects of entering the Holy Lord realm would naturally be completely different between the two. This was especially true for Lin Ming. The laws he cultivated were far too vast and his understandings into them weren't profound enough. If he couldn't gain a deep comprehension of these laws and made cultivation breakthroughs rapidly and randomly, that would inevitably affect his future achievements. Towards all of this, Lin Ming remained silent. Indeed, his cultivation boundary had risen far too fast. From the early Holy Lord realm to the peak Holy Lord realm, he had only used a mere several dozen years. Compared to other geniuses, he was at least 10 times faster. He would have to make up for the consequences of having his cultivation progress so rapidly. In other words, Lin Ming would have to spend a long time at the peak Holy Lord realm before he broke into the World King realm. Breaking into the World King realm would be an important step in Lin Ming's road of martial arts. He couldn't be even the least bit careless about it. Then, Lin Ming examined his body. He discovered his inner world had expanded yet again. The size of his inner world was actually much broader than many World King-level powerhouses' inner worlds. Even so, Lin Ming could feel that within his body, the two strengths which belonged to the Azura Roadmaster and Holy Scripture Creator still stood opposite to each other like water and oil, unable to fuse. They each occupied a part of Lin Ming's body, faintly opposing each other with equal force. Indeed, wanting to fuse these two strengths together is far too hard. Lin Ming sighed. The road he wanted to walk down was one that no one had ever walked down even in 10 billion years. To many geniuses, if they could only cultivate their inner or outer universe and bring it to the limit, that was already an unimaginable achievement. And wanting to fuse the two together, that was just the wishful thinking of a crazed idiot. Lin Ming had a faint premonition that these two strengths were lying in ambush deep within his body. If he couldn't fuse them together, then they would slowly develop with time. For himself, this might be an extremely dangerous matter. To fuse together two laws that were beyond divinity, as well as to consolidate his foundation and break into the World King realm. These two brutally difficult missions were like two large mountains that lay in front of Lin Ming's road of martial arts. To cross over them one at a time, that was easier said than done. At the very least, it will take 100 years to consolidate my foundation and break into the World King realm. But 100 years from now, just what sort of situation will the divine realm be in? Lin Ming silently thought to himself, gripping his fists. Chapter 1893, 6 Supreme Treasures. Chapter 1893, 6 Supreme Treasures. After Lin Ming absorbed the blood essence from the Holy Scripture creator, the earth began to shake. The massive cold ice mirror that stood tall in the world started to descend, falling back into the earth. And at the same time, in front of Lin Ming and the others' eyes, a blue stone road appeared. This blue stone road rose into the skies, and at the end, a shrine emerged. This shrine was old, emitting the aura of endless years. It had floated in the skies for an unimaginable span of time. Around the shrine was a giant array formation. This array formation contained a terrifying energy. Thick chains wrapped around the shrine like black dragons, fixing the shrine in the skies. The shrine should have already existed here, but it was covered by the cold ice mirror before. Everyone glanced at each other. Just what was in this shrine? This is the final road. If I'm not wrong, then this is the Azura shrine recorded in the ancient texts of my god race. If there is a path to salvation in the Azura forbidden land, then it should be sealed within that Azura shrine, Di Wuhen suddenly said, his voice quivering. With the end so close, he couldn't contain his excitement. He felt a deep anticipation but also a deep fear. He anticipated that there was something within the Azura shrine which could turn the tide of war. But, he also feared that this was nothing but a one-sided wish from their side. He was afraid that there was no way to save their primal god race. This bluestone road, can we go up? Smokeless frowned. She felt that only Lin Ming had managed to pass the test of the cold ice mirror and she had barely been able to mix herself into the pool of victors. As for the others, they weren't close at all. In this situation, did they have the qualifications to step into the final shrine? Smokeless words caused Di Wuhen to hesitate for a moment. He paused at the bluestone road and then carefully said, "The ancestors are merciful. Even if I have lost honor for the god race, I am still their flesh and blood descendant. With the destruction of our race arriving, even if we are useless trash, the ancestors still shouldn't be indifferent towards us and let us perish." As he spoke, Di Wuhen raised his robes and knelt on the floor, deeply bowing towards the shrine. Behind Di Wuhen, Shunku, Lanlu, and the others also knelt, all of them deeply bowing towards the shrine. After kneeling for 10 breaths of time, they stood up. Then, Di Wuhen took a slow and careful step forwards and stepped onto the bluestone road. Finally, he discovered that he wasn't forced back by the array formation. Di Wuhen was overjoyed. He stepped forwards, allowing the others to step onto the bluestone road. "We can go." On this road, Di Wuhen was covered with a strange feeling. It was like his entire being had become ethereal, as if he were withstanding a baptism of the endless laws of the universe. Shunku, Lanlu, and the others also followed up on the bluestone road. Then there was Lin Ming. He looked at the bluestone road, finding it similar to the bluestone road he had encountered in the Azura Road's final trial, within the planet-sized heavenly palace. The blue stone there had also contained the aura of laws. Everyone carefully moved towards the Azura shrine. The road didn't seem too long, but everyone walked for an entire day. They walked extremely slowly, allowing themselves to become aware of the laws here as much as possible. Finally, the 6 people neared the shrine. Lifting their eyes, they saw the entire temple shrouded in blue light. There was a formidable energy contained within that grew endlessly, not seeming like it had experienced 10 billion years at all. The great doors of the shrine were shut tight. But as the group neared, the doors swung open. Di Wuhen and Tabague walked at the front, cautiously leading the way into the Azura shrine. There were no dangers within the shrine. Lin Ming could feel that the laws here were peaceful, most of them were defensive array formations. As long as no one tried to destroy the shrine, then there wouldn't be any killing intent. The passage leading into the shrine wasn't too long. The 6 stepped in, their feet walking on tiles that had been untouched for countless hundreds of millions of years. Light pattering sounds echoed within. At the end of the passage was a vast grand hall. This grand hall was over 1,000 feet long and wide, similar to a city square. The light of the laws illuminated this hall, making the entire hall shine as if it were daytime within. As the 6 people entered the grand hall, they could see an altar at the center. This altar was only several dozen feet high, but had a stairway of 9 steps. Each step was carved with beautiful images with faint, multi-hued lights sparkling from them, bursting with auspicious sights. But at this time, no one bothered with the stairs. Instead, all of their eyes were focused on the skies above the altar. There, floating in the air, were 6 items, each one of them completely different from the others. Standing outside the altar, because of the light of the laws and their shadows, it was hard for people to immediately discern what these 6 items were. What a powerful aura! These were left behind by the Azura Road Master. Lin Ming could confirm that these 6 items were not ordinary treasures at all. Beside Lin Ming, Shunku, Tabague, and the others were all panting loudly. Because of these precious treasures, it was hard for them to suppress their mood. These were supreme treasures from 10 billion years ago. Any one of them was countless times more precious than a true divinity spirit treasure. Millimeter? There are words here. Smokeless suddenly said. Everyone followed her gaze to see that somewhere on the altar, there were words of the primal god race carved onto it. No one present had a problem understanding the primal god race language. They soon understood what it meant. It was the division of treasure. Of the 6 treasures, only 3 could be chosen. Of these 3, 1 belonged to them all. But as for 2 others, they belonged solely to the person who had passed the cold ice mirror. In other words, they belonged to Lin Ming. Seeing the rules of assignment, everyone glanced at Lin Ming with envy. To choose 3 treasures and for 2 of them to go to Lin Ming, this was truly enough to arouse one's envy. Of course, because of the protection of laws in the Azura Forbidden Land, as well as the old god sovereign's support of Lin Ming, and also the immeasurable function that Lin Ming had in helping the ancient races survive this great calamity, no matter how much anyone envied Lin Ming, none of them would think about plotting against him. Choosing treasures. Di Wuhen sucked in a deep breath, his voice shaking. The reason they came to the Azura Forbidden Land was for this moment. Whether or not they could see a ray of hope in the dark, all of that would depend on what these treasures were. The group slowly flew towards the altar. They could feel the vast power of laws swell towards them like a wave. The first treasure was facing the group. It was a large furnace. This furnace was 30 feet high and had a simple and plain design. There were runes carved onto it, with a Doutai diagram and all sorts of other flowers and birds. These carvings didn't seem exquisite at all. In fact, they appeared rather rough. Looking at the furnace, there didn't seem to be anything special about it, as if it were some common bronze antique found within the mortal world. However, for this furnace to be placed here, everyone knew that it had to be some uncommon treasure. Without a doubt, it was likely some supreme magic tool that the Azura Roadmaster carried with him in the past. There are markings within the furnace, Smokeless suddenly said. Everyone looked in to see that within the furnace, there were dense small writings. These writings were in the language of the primal god race, each word flooded with the power of mystical law runes. They were faint, seemingly covered with fog, making one unable to see them clearly. This furnace is a beyond divinity level supreme treasure. A brilliant light flashed in Lin Ming's eyes. This furnace, he wanted it. Not to mention the terrifying strength of the furnace itself, just the runes and writings within the furnace left him blinded with desire. If he could perceive them, then the advantages would be unimaginable. What an excellent furnace! Di Wuhen sighed in praise. But he only looked. This furnace was precious, but it wasn't enough to save their god race. Not to mention anything else, just its terrifying grade of beyond divinity meant that it wasn't something the average person could operate. Perhaps even an extreme Empyrean might only be able to display a few % of the furnace's power. How could anyone think of killing the good fortune Saint Sovereign with this alone? The group continued to look. On the side of the furnace was a pillbox. The pillbox was completely sealed, as if there was a separate universe within. Lin Ming didn't know what pill it was, nor could he smell the medicinal fragrance. Everything had been blocked out. But Lin Ming could faintly feel that there seemed to be the rhythm of a heartbeat echoing from the pillbox, exuding an incredible life force, as if there was some spiritual existence being bred within. The pill has manifested spirituality. The Azura Roadmaster has left behind a pill that had been enshrined on this altar for 10 billion years. Just what would it be like now? This pill had likely become an existence similar to the Essence Spirit Embryo Stone. Upon opening this pillbox, the pill might fly out into the skies, developing its own mind and intelligence, even being able to cultivate on its own. Such a pill left everyone shocked. Shunku and Lanlu even wondered whether they would be able to keep the pill from running with their current level of strength after opening the box. Wanting to prevent it from escaping wouldn't be easy, and as for swallowing it, the difficulty of that task could be imagined. A pill on this level, would swallowing it cause the body to explode with energy? As Tabague spoke, he looked at Di Wuhen. Di Wuhen shook his head, indicating that he wouldn't choose this pill, because the pill wasn't enough to save their people. Di Wuhen looked at Lin Ming. Lin Ming was silent. He alone could choose 2 items, so he wasn't in a hurry. The third item was a black symbol paper. This symbol paper had dense and complex runes drawn across it. This was a divine runic symbol as well as a so-called God decree. This was different from the God decrees Lin Ming had seen before that had already turned yellow. This God decree contained an incomparably horrifying strength. The power of laws within hadn't faded in the slightest even after 10 billion years, and instead faintly enhanced. This God decree. Lin Ming's eyes brightened. He looked at the lines atop the God decree, slowly analyzing its function. The 4th supreme treasure was a small green bottle. This bottle exuded a halo of light. As Lin Ming probed it with his sense, he felt a familiar aura. He had felt an aura like this before, in the planet-sized heavenly palace at the Azura Road's final trial. He would absolutely not mistake what this was. It was the aura of Azura blood. This green bottle contained a drop of Azura blood. And from the aura it exuded, it was even beyond that of the drop of blood within the planet-sized heavenly palace. This doesn't seem like an object of salvation either. As Di Wuhen spoke, he felt his heart tighten. In this Azura forbidden land, would there not be anything that could save their people? Chapter 1894, Lin Ming's Choice. Chapter 1894, Lin Ming's Choice. Out of these 4 items Lin Ming had seen so far, he had difficulty deciding which to choose. Each one would be useful to him, so which should he select in the end? At this time, Lin Ming's gaze swept towards the 5th supreme treasure. This treasure was the most unusual. It was a jade ship the size of a palm. The jade ship was covered with array formations and emitted a deep blue divine light all over it. Although this divine light was bright, it was gentle, without glaring in the least. This palm-sized jade ship was undoubtedly a beyond divinity level supreme treasure. But after clearly seeing this jade ship, it wasn't just Di Wuhen, but Tabague also began to sweat. Of these 5 treasures, none of them seemed able to force back the saint. Jade ship. Should we have all the people of our races take refuge in this jade ship? Smokeless muttered. Di Wuhen shook his head. It's useless. Even if this is a beyond divinity level treasure ship, it will be difficult for us to display its strength. Once we are surrounded by a true divinity, that means we will be intercepted. At that time we would be nothing but a turtle in a jar. Even if the good fortune Saint Sovereign could not break apart this treasure ship quickly, he could easily kill us once this treasure ship exhausts itself of energy. What Di Wuhen had described was something Lin Ming had personally experienced for himself. Before, He had used Primordius Heavenly Palace to flee from Tianmingzi and had ended up in such a situation. Although Tianmingzi wasn't able to break apart Primordius Heavenly Palace, he was actually able to slowly exhaust the energy within it. Once that time came, he would have died. Then, there was the last treasure. This last treasure was the smallest. It was shrouded in divine light, making it difficult to see what it was. Everyone focused their senses into threads and slowly probed this light before verifying what the supreme treasure appeared to be. It was a piece of jade the size of a baby's palm. The jade was carved with numerous mystical runes. Besides that, it didn't seem particularly special at all. This. Di Wuhen's voice shivered. He looked at this jade piece and was unable to discover anything strange about it, nor did he understand its function. By relying on this, could they defeat the saints? Di Wuhen, Tabague, and the others felt as if they were drowning in despair. Of these 6 treasures, could any of them be the salvation their people needed? However, at this time, as Lin Ming looked at the 6th and final supreme treasure, his heart began to race with excitement. The Emperor Jade of Fate. It was impossible for him to be mistaken. This 6th supreme treasure was the Emperor Jade of Fate he had been searching for all this time. Those with fate would encounter it eventually, those without fate would never meet it. This was the final mysterious key needed to open the last level of the Azura Road's final trial. Unfortunately, it wasn't time for the final trial to open, otherwise Lin Ming would have wanted to re-enter the Azura Road and use the 2 other Emperor Jades he had with this one to open the final divine treasure trove. Lin Ming's change in state of mind was undetected by anyone else. They were all stuck making a difficult choice. This choice was just far too important. Di Wuhen said, "Choose, but be careful. These 6 treasures concern the future of not only the ancient remnant races, but even the future of the entire 33 heavens. They are something that will change the result of the great calamity. In choosing the treasure, we must consider the choice carefully and make sure we unravel and understand the functions of each supreme treasure." As Di Wuhen spoke, the truth was that he was speaking to Lin Ming. He knew Lin Ming was proficient in the Azura laws, and only he could easily see through the functions of these supreme treasures. Of these 6 supreme treasures, they were the Jade Ship, Emperor Jade, God Decree, Furnace, Pill, and Azura Blood. For Tabague and Di Wuhen, it was far too difficult to differentiate just which supreme treasure would be the most valuable. Or maybe, Di Wuhen looked at the God Decree. If he had to choose from the 6 items, he would think that the God Decree of which they currently hadn't discovered the function would most likely be the treasure of salvation. If they could rely on it to kill the good fortune Saint Sovereign. "Little brother Lin, look at the God Decree. Its function is." Tabague asked Lin Ming, hope thick in his voice. Lin Ming's eyes moved to the God Decree. In truth, he had been paying attention to the God Decree for a long time already. It was impossible for him to repair or to duplicate a divine runic symbol personally drawn up by the Azura Road Master. But to simply discover its function, that was within the realm of possibility. Slowly, he began to discern the lines atop the divine runic symbol, gradually extrapolating just what its use was. Everyone impatiently huddled around Lin Ming, waiting for him to finish. "Choose this." After an hour of silence, Lin Ming slowly and clearly said, "Oh, this is." Tabague and Di Wuhen's eyes shined. These past days they had gotten to understand Lin Ming's character. They knew that if he said such things, he naturally had a reasonable explanation. Perhaps they might be able to find a favorable turn in this great calamity. This God Decree, can it kill the good fortune Saint Sovereign? Di Wuhen couldn't help but ask. Yet Lin Ming shook his head. "No, it has no striking power, and it is not an offensive God Decree." "What?" Di Wuhen staggered backwards. "That is." Lin Ming thought for a moment and then said, "If I'm not wrong, then this God Decree can be used multiple times. And its function is to shuttle through the 33 heavens. In other words, to pierce through the God-lamenting wall." Lin Ming's words were shocking. Everyone was stunned. Pierce through the God-lamenting wall? The path to salvation, then wasn't it, to flee? Di Wuhen and Tabague looked to each other. They knew that in the universes of the 33 heavens, There were some heavens that were complete wildernesses. These universes had no smoke of the mortal world, and there were few intelligent life forms. But this didn't mean that they were completely unsuited for survival. It was just that the God-lamenting wall separating these wild universes was too strong, and they were isolated far away from other universes. If they could flee to these universes, then it was possible for them to contend with the saints. This was because even for the good fortune Saint Sovereign, if he wished to pierce through the God-lamenting wall, he would have to pay a deep price. To run away. Di Wuhen didn't know what taste was on his tongue. He muttered these words again and again. This is the only choice. Tobague bitterly sighed and patted Di Wuhen's shoulder. To have them leave the Primeval universe like this, to leave the homeland that their races had lived in for 10 billion years, it was inevitable that they would be moved by this. However, for them, this universe had become a dead end. The heavens bless my God race. Di Wuhen meditated in his heart. In the air, he bowed deeply once more, and then reached out with his hands to take the God decree. Under the protective rules, the array formation around the God decree didn't stop Di Wuhen. Like this, he smoothly took the God decree into his hands. The soft silky feeling caused Di Wuhen's hands to quiver. What he held in his hands was the future of the ancient remnant races. Little brother Lin, we have already made our choice. What about yours? Tobague asked. Lin Ming hesitated for a moment. From the 5 remaining items, choosing 2 of them wasn't easy at all. After pondering over the choices for 10 breaths of time, Lin Ming bowed and then reached out his hands. First, he took the Emperor Jade of Fate. No matter what, he had to obtain this item. He believed that deep in the Azura Road's final trial, that was where the Azura Roadmaster had left behind his most core inheritance. This. Seeing Lin Ming receive the Emperor Jade, they were all surprised. Smokeless frowned. She looked at Lin Ming, confused. The first item that Lin Ming chose should be the one that he thought was the most precious. However, in Smokeless' opinion, of the 5 remaining treasures, the most valuable one was the mysterious pill. The other items were all external items, but a pill could directly enhance a martial artist's strength. Its value was naturally the greatest. She couldn't understand Lin Ming's choice. Could this Emperor Jade be some extraordinary thing? Did Lin Ming see just how precious it was? There's still one more. Lin Ming's eyes swept over the 4 remaining items, one at a time. The Azura blood. The Azura blood was definitely good, but Lin Ming had already absorbed it once. If he absorbed this Azura blood a second time, the effects would be greatly diminished. Moreover, Lin Ming had already obtained the blood of the Holy Scripture creator. Lin Ming's plan was to fuse the 2 different strengths within him through cultivating. Considering this, it would be far easier fusing together the 2 different powers if they were balanced. Thus, Lin Ming first gave up on the Azura blood. Then there was the furnace, mysterious pill, and jade ship. Lin Ming considered his choices again and again. Finally, he grit his teeth and reached out for the jade ship. This jade ship was the size of his palm. As it fell into Lin Ming's hand, it spun around, its entire body white and emitting a soft atmosphere. Thus, Lin Ming finished making his choices. He had chosen the Emperor Jade as well as the jade ship. Chapter 1895, The God Sovereign's Decision. Chapter 1895, The God Sovereign's Decision. Lin Ming's second choice was the jade ship. Seeing this, Tobague, Smokeless, Di Wuhen, and the others were all left stunned. This jade ship should have once been the personal transportation of the Azura Roadmaster, a beyond divinity level spirit treasure spirit ship. Creating a spirit ship was far more difficult than forging a weapon or refining a pill. Moreover, the materials required for the construction were also far higher. But to Lin Ming, the furnace with the law runes engraved within or the pill would have been much more useful for his cultivation. To him, this spirit ship wasn't too meaningful. Lin Ming, you chose this spirit ship, for. Di Wuhen had already guessed why Lin Ming made this choice, but he didn't dare to randomly assume. Thus, he asked Lin Ming this question. To escape. Otherwise, even with the God decree, none of you will be able to escape the Chaos Star Ocean. Without reaching the edge of the Primeval universe, there will be no way to break through the God-lamenting wall. Currently, the primal god race and the Celestials were under a deep siege by the Saints. They had only managed to delay for time by relying on the endless black holes and spacetime vortexes within the Chaos Star Ocean. In this situation, wanting to break through the ranks of the Saints was unlikely. Di Wuhen and Tabague were at a loss for how to respond to Lin Ming's words. Lin Ming had used one of his chances to choose a supreme treasure to pick the spirit ship, all in order to allow the ancient remnant races a slim ray of hope. This benevolence was far too heavy. Lin Ming shook his head. You do not need to thank me. First, the old god sovereign has treated me well, and second, I am also doing this for my own people. I think that the ancient remnant races can break through the space barrier to fly to the divine realm, and then use this spirit ship to carry away a part of the divine realm's people to break through the god-lamenting wall once more and fly to a wild universe together. The great calamity lay before them. Lin Ming was well aware that just by relying on himself as well as the Empyreans of humanity, it would be impossible to resist the Saints. It was inevitable that the divine realm would be captured by their enemies. The divine realm had quadrillions of trillions of people as well as millions of worlds. The total number of humans was incalculable. Moreover, they were widely dispersed throughout the vast divine realm, so wanting to exterminate them all was a nigh impossible task. Even if the Saints used crowds of Empyreans and world kings to search through each world and kill all humans they could find, they might not be able to finish the job even with 100 million years. But the truth was that the Saints didn't need to totally annihilate humanity. Rather, they simply needed to destroy the inheritances of humanity. As long as they destroyed all the human holy lands and large influences, humanity would lose their foundation. They would devolve into the humans that lived in the soul world, becoming nothing but a race of slaves that were ruled by others. After that they would slowly decline until they were finally destroyed. Thus, the elites of humanity could not be allowed to die. Divine Dream, Emperor Sokia, Dragon Fang, Jun Blue Moon, Han Kai, as well as the many Empyreans, world kings, Empyrean descendants, the peerless proud children of heaven, these people were all the future of humanity. They represented the greatest achievements in martial arts that humanity had developed. In order for the inheritances of humanity's martial arts to continue onwards, these people were all needed. With a short 100 years, this was all Lin Ming could do. In fact, this could be said to be the only choice possible in a situation where they were cornered and without a path out. Pass into the divine realm and join together with the human race. Di Wuhen was thoughtful. The ancient remnant races allying with humanity was perhaps a good decision. Since they both had the goal of destroying the Saints, this was a union of interests. Of course, such a significant prospect had to be reported to the old god sovereign so that he could make the final decision. Like this, the venture into the Azura Forbidden Land ended. Lin Ming had obtained what he wanted the most, the Emperor Jade of Fate. What followed next was waiting for the Azura Road's final trial to open. But before then, he had to assist humanity and the ancient remnant races in evacuating their universes. All of this was a perfectly ideal situation. But, would the future really develop in the road he wished? Lin Ming couldn't judge that. As they said, man proposes, but heaven disposes. Even if he failed, even if humanity was destroyed, even if he died, he would not regret the choices he made for himself, he wouldn't regret refusing Sheng Mai. Everything he did was to follow his heart. This was especially true after he saw Empyrean Primordius in that dark chamber, and those alarming words he had etched into the ground. Seeing them had strengthened Lin Ming's belief. Even if he suffered a cruel death, he wanted to follow his heart and walk forwards, one step at a time. Lin Ming returned to the primal god race. The old god sovereign had already been waiting for him for a long time. After seeing everyone return safely as well as after hearing Di Wuhen's recounting of what happened, the old god sovereign was extremely startled. Although he knew that Lin Ming was extraordinary, he didn't think that his performance in the Azura Forbidden Land would have been so amazing. He had jumped ranks to strike down one of the strongest geniuses from the ancient era. As for allying the god race with the human race, the old god sovereign readily agreed to this. Although taking a detour to the divine realm would make their escape far more dangerous, this would be greatly beneficial to the reformation of their race in the future. Moreover, If it weren't for Lin Ming, they would have had no chance of fleeing. They would have only been able to sit here and wait for death. This is a spirit ship left behind by the Azura Roadmaster. Next to a black stone table, the numerous powerhouses of the god race and celestial races had gathered together. An emergency summons had been sent out, calling them all here. Yes, we've studied this spirit ship. It can change size at will, and there is a separate dimensional space within it, one that is extremely vast. It can completely fit all the ancient remnant races that are currently residing in the Chaos Star Ocean. Wanting to fit several billion martial artists in the spirit ship wasn't difficult at all. A 30 by 30 mile square plane could fit 1 billion people, and if divided into levels, it could fit dozens of billions or even hundreds of billions of people. And this spirit ship was far, far larger than that. Moreover, those within the spirit ship also carried their own spatial magic tools. These magic tools could also hold people, increasing the holding capacity at exponential rates. Currently, the god race's population only consisted of a pitiful several dozen millions of people. And these people weren't all located within the Chaos Star Ocean. Even with the Celestials and all the other races added together, the spirit ship could still fit many times more their number. The plan will commence 1 month from now. At the appointed time, we will begin a covert operation and convene all our people here. We will have them all shifted into the spirit ship within 20 days, and afterwards, the spirit ship will set off. The fate of our people will depend on whether or not we can break through the siege. The old god sovereign waved his hand, loudly declaring. The truth was that this was not a meeting, but simply a notice. An escape plan had been formulated long before this. No matter who or where they were, all had to obey. Break through. Hearing these words, the numerous powerhouses present fell silent. They knew that breaking out of the siege wouldn't be easy. Making sacrifices was an unavoidable matter, and if they were unlucky, it was possible they would all be annihilated. The Great War that would happen 50 days from now, that would concern the life or death of all the ancient remnant races. After everyone was silent for a long time, the old god sovereign quietly spoke up. Lin Ming Jr. is present. Lin Ming stood up. The old god sovereign lovingly looked at Lin Ming. He slowly said, "This is a spirit ship that you brought back. Its name has long been lost to time. Why don't you give it a new name?" Lin Ming's thoughts stirred. His eyes moved away from the old god sovereign. At that moment, his eyes seemed to pierce through the space barrier of the Grand Hall and gaze into the boundless starry skies. "Let's call it Hope. The Ark of Hope," Lin Ming whispered. News of Lin Ming, Di Wuhen, and the others bringing back the method to salvation from the Azura Forbidden Land was completely blocked off. Only the high-level figures of the god race and celestial race were aware of it. This was in order to avoid anything being revealed to the Saints, so that they wouldn't launch a desperate invasion into the Chaos Star Ocean. Currently, the god race needed time. The old god sovereign had chosen to leave a month before the summoning of the people and the start of the plan. The truth was that this was all in order for Lin Ming to repair god decrees. As soon as Lin Ming returned to the god race, he threw himself into a chamber. There wasn't much time until they fled. With the god race's current strength, even with the support of the Azura Roadmaster's spirit ship, wanting to break out of the Saint race's encirclement would be mind-bogglingly difficult. And if they had a batch of high-quality god decrees assisting them, this mission would be much easier. For a time, the entire god race was shrouded in a tense and oppressive atmosphere. Lin Ming repaired the god decrees without a sense of day or night. His cultivation wasn't high to begin with, and these god decrees were top divine runic symbols left behind by true divinity-level supreme elders. Wanting to repair them wasn't easy at all. Thus, the old god sovereign had sent out several peak Empyreans to be on standby and assist Lin Ming wherever possible. These peak Empyreans also considered following Lin Ming to learn some techniques. At this time, they wanted to learn divine runic arts, not to steal anything, but only to help Lin Ming. They wanted to assist him so that there would be more god decrees and stronger god decrees to deal with the Saints. But they slowly discovered that no matter how diligent they were in their studies, they weren't able to learn anything at all. This divine runic arts technique seemed exclusive to Lin Ming. Besides him, No one else was able to understand anything about it. Another god decree was repaired by Lin Ming. His soul force frequently ran dry. Then, he would sit in meditation, slowly restoring himself. Lin Ming, His Majesty the Battle Sovereign has bid me to send these soul recovery pills. After Lin Ming completed a repair job and was beginning to rest, Smokeless entered his chamber. In order to break out of the besiegement, the Celestials gave every effort they could. These soul recovery pills that Smokeless brought were top-quality pills amongst top-quality pills. Several soul-forging specialized Celestial Empyreans had collaborated in order to refine these, using all sorts of precious soul-nourishing materials without hesitating to pay any price. At this time, no one felt there wasn't anything they weren't willing to give up. They would spend anything as long as it helped that much more. Thank you. Lin Ming's voice had a hint of exhaustion that was hard to conceal. At this time, his face was white and his eyes were bloodshot. Piles of materials were haphazardly thrown about all over his chamber. This was because some god decrees were incredibly damaged. Lin Ming even needed to redraw some tiny runes on these god decrees. Adding runes was even more taxing on Lin Ming. Even if it was just a little, this exhausted his soul force. Smokeless looked at such a Lin Ming, a complex light in her eyes. Because she had taunted Lin Ming and had even been hostile to him in the past, she felt nothing but a crushing guilt. Make sure you rest well. Smokeless bit her lips, speaking in a soft voice. If an ordinary person were to say such words, it would only be considered polite. But to Smokeless, who was born arrogant and coldly indifferent, these were rare words. I understand. Thank you for the soul recovery pills. Lin Ming had incredible attainments in the soul. He was naturally able to see how uncommon these soul recovery pills were. To him, repairing these god decrees under a high period of stress was a good chance to temper himself. And with these precious soul recovery pills, he could wantonly overdraw his soul force without consideration of whether there would be any lasting damages left over. Millimeter. Smokeless nodded. She looked deeply at Lin Ming and then left the chamber. The repair process of the god decrees continued on as intensely as it did before. At this time, Lin Ming, who had overdrawn his soul force numerous times already, didn't know that in a place countless miles away, something terrifying was brewing. Chapter 1896, The Giant Beast in the Blood Pool. Chapter 1896, The Giant Beast in the Blood Pool. In the deep vastness of space, there was a metal planet. On the surface of this planet there was a cave entrance that was over 1,000 miles wide. The edges of this massive hole were smooth and uniform, clearly not formed by natural forces but forcefully carved out by a powerhouse using their great supernatural might. This cave was fathomless. If one entered, they would find something even more astonishing. After entering 1,000 miles deep, there was a titanic space over 10,000 miles wide in radius. This was the same as the entire planet being carved out from within. And in this massive space was a crimson blood pond that stretched out for thousands of miles. Blood surged and rippled. Killing intent soared to the heavens, alarming to the senses. In the skies above the blood pond, a middle-aged man in a rainbow-hued robe quietly floated. This middle-aged man had deep red hair and his looks were ancient and profound, as if his appearance were carved by a saber. At this time, his eyes were shut tight and his hands were grasping across his chest, his 10 fingers splayed outwards, tightly grabbing onto his shoulders. His lips murmured as if he were reciting some ancient text. Beneath him, the blood pond seethed and roiled. The scent of blood filled the world. Slowly, countless bubbles slowly emerged from the blood pond, as if it were boiling over with excitement. More and more bubbles emerged, becoming increasingly dense. The splashing of the blood pond grew larger and larger until finally, with a loud explosion, a massive head thrust out from the blood pond, bringing with it a wave of blood over 100 miles high that crashed into the horizon. An endless rain of blood fell down like a torrential waterfall. But the middle-aged man still remained motionless, his eyes shut tight. He floated within this torrent of blood, but not a single drop touched his body. What had just come out of the blood pond was a fierce demonic head. This head was 100 miles long with a pair of curved horns and a great maw, just like a malevolent red dragon. This malevolent red dragon wildly roared, its massive head swinging from side to side. At this time, massive bubbles emerged from the blood pond once more. With a great rumble, another ferocious dragon head hurtled out, tumbling about in the skies. And following that, fierce dragon after fierce dragon drilled out from the blood pond. It was unknown just how many there were. If a martial artist were to enter this planet at this time, they would definitely be bewildered. They would think that this blood pond was a giant dragon nest and there were many wicked dragons slumbering within. However, what followed next was shocking. After over 30 fierce dragons rushed out from the blood pond, the entire pond of blood began to rapidly lower, drying up. The surface of the blood pond dropped again and again. Eventually, a titanic 10,000-mile-long spherical object was exposed. This ball-like object was the same color as the blood pond, and if one didn't look carefully they might even think it was the same. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Viscous blood poured down from the surface of the sphere like a waterfall, eventually revealing thick black chains. These black chains overlapped each other, firmly locking down that sphere and completely binding it. As the blood pond lowered more and more, the sphere began to slowly wriggle. There were even beating sounds from within, like the beating of a heart. Faintly, one could feel a vast aura of life emitting from this sphere. It seemed to be a mass of flesh and blood. As for the 30-plus fierce red dragons, at the end of their necks that were hundreds of miles long, they were connected to this massive ball of flesh and blood. In other words, the 30-plus cruel red dragons were not individuals, but part of a whole. They were branches of this humongous sphere. It was hard to imagine what sort of terrifying life form this sphere was. In size alone it was 10,000 miles wide and had more than 30 fierce red dragon heads extending from it, each one emitting a terrifying aura no less than that of a true dragon. As this horrifying monster appeared, the rainbow-robed man floating in the skies frowned. Beads of sweat had developed at his temples. He had clearly consumed a great deal of energy. His lips changed as fast as a bolt of lightning. He continued to chant, his words becoming faster and faster. The words he spoke formed visible runes in the air that flew towards the bizarre giant monster. Then, like water into an ocean, they submerged into the monster's body. The middle-aged man consumed more and more energy. His blood vitality tumbled in his body and astral essence gushed out from him. He became increasingly bright, sparkling like a bright afternoon sun. Mark of the Saint Ancestors, seal. The middle-aged man's eyes suddenly popped open. At that moment, all of the texts he chanted gathered together, forming a massive curse seal that flew towards the monster. Then, this curse seal reflected atop the middle-aged man's head. It slowly sank into the monster and disappeared from sight. Woo woo woo. Woo woo woo. The monster emitted a deep and bass cry like an earthquake. The entire planet shook, as if it were affected, thundering together with the monster. This process continued for half an incense stick of time. Then, with a crashing sound, something strange occurred. Of the monster's 30-some dragon heads, one of them suddenly melted away, turning into bright red blood that rained down to the ground. And after several more breaths of time, another dragon head exploded, turning into blood rain once more. Like this, the 30-some dragon heads each exploded one after another, all of them turning to blood. Blood gushed down, soaking the monster. After the monster was soaked in this blood, its main body also began to slowly melt away, like a piece of thick lard being heated into liquid. Finally, the main body completely disappeared, turned into a blood pond. To begin with, there was no blood pond in this planet, but instead a transformed giant monster. When the blood pond completely calmed down, the rainbow-robed man closed his eyes, meditating in the void. Chanting all those texts and using the technique he just did had consumed a great deal of his strength. As the man was meditating, a flame lit up in front of him. The man frowned and opened his eyes. Soul Emperor, that old monster, just why is he looking for me? The man's eyes flashed with a strange brilliance. In the next moment he casually tore open the void and stepped forwards. His surroundings changed as he suddenly arrived in a grand hall built of crystal. Floating in the center of this grand hall was a person's shadow. This shadow was fuzzy and undefined, it was clearly just an illusion. This illusion was that of a youth with smooth, fair skin, and black hair that fell like a waterfall. But, What was bizarre was that this illusion's eyes were filthy and spiritless, as if on the verge of death. Such an appearance made one's scalp creep. The old youth looked at the middle-aged man. His lips slightly parted. "You seem to have exhausted yourself considerably. I wonder what it is that can cause the sovereign of the saints to work so hard." The rainbow-robed man was the saint race's good fortune saint sovereign. "You worry about too many things," the good fortune saint sovereign indifferently said, with no intentions of mentioning the spell he just cast. "Just what are you doing here?" The good fortune saint sovereign's eyes glared at the Soul Emperor. Although they had come to a temporary truce, they were absolutely not friends. "I have come here especially to tell you some news." The Soul Emperor's voice was old and empty, without the least bit of feeling, as if he were speaking words of ice. "Then speak. There is a person. He has gone to the Primeval universe. He is something you might be interested in. His name is Lin Ming," the Soul Emperor quietly said. As the good fortune saint sovereign heard this, his eyebrows leapt up. "Lin Ming. He has arrived at the Primeval universe." The good fortune saint sovereign was certainly not unfamiliar with the name Lin Ming. Lin Ming was a terrifying youth. At a mere 100 years of age, he could suppress seniors several times his age. He was even able to defeat the good fortune saint's son, someone that was an entire large boundary higher. If such a person were allowed time, then their future would be unimaginable. But now, Lin Ming was weak. The good fortune saint sovereign certainly wouldn't allow Lin Ming to freely grow. He had already planned to kill Lin Ming in the next few hundred years and eliminate all potential problems, cutting the weeds at the root. However, before this the good fortune saint sovereign always had matters he needed to attend to. For instance, dealing with the spiriters or dealing with the saints, or even refining that mysterious blood pond in the planet just now. But now, the good fortune saint sovereign actually learned from the Soul Emperor that Lin Ming had arrived at the Primeval universe. This was also the universe that the saints were invading. If so, then he could completely annihilate the ancient remnant races and conveniently kill off Lin Ming while he was at it. "Really, you choose not to walk the road to heaven but would rather burst through the gates of hell," the good fortune saint sovereign sneered, a bloodthirsty light shining in his eyes. Killing Lin Ming was the same as wiping out the hope of humanity. Chapter 1897, Raise the Sails. Chapter 1897, Raise the Sails. Soul World, Soul Rapture Holy Lands. In a grand hall crafted from soul crystals, an old youth stood beside an altar. His hands were crossed in front of his chest. His eyes were closed and his divine sense stretched out like the tentacles of a monster, piercing through the God-lamenting wall. This youth was the Soul Emperor. In a normal situation, even the Soul Emperor who ruled the entire soul world would find it impossible to penetrate the God-lamenting wall with his sense. But, if he was able to leave a mark on someone ahead of time, then even if that person wasn't in the same universe he would still be able to pass through the 33 heavens to sense them. The Soul Emperor and the good fortune saint sovereign had both left marks on each other's bodies. As long as they wished for it, they could cross the layers of universes to communicate. Currently, the Soul Emperor had contacted the good fortune saint sovereign in order to tell him about news related to Lin Ming. Sa. The Soul Emperor's eyes opened. At the same time, the connection between him and the good fortune saint sovereign was interrupted. In front of the Soul Emperor, the blurry shade of the good fortune saint sovereign slowly disappeared without a trace. The Soul Emperor was silent. He descended from the altar, one step at a time. With his long black hair and his snow-white robe, from the back he appeared like an extraordinarily beautiful youth at the peak of his prime. And standing in front of the Soul Emperor was a woman wrapped in a black cloak. This woman was Sheng Mai. At this time, Sheng Mai had lowered her eyes. Her expression was faint and indifferent. It was impossible to tell what she was thinking. "Has your heart gone soft?" the Soul Emperor suddenly asked. Sheng Mai pressed her eyebrows together, not responding. The Soul Emperor smiled. "There is no need for you to put on a play before me. I already have a general feeling of the thoughts within your heart. You personally spoke with Lin Ming and blocked out my sense. Afterwards, Lin Ming went to the Primeval universe. You spoke with him in private for almost a quarter hour. Just what did you talk about?" A light smile hung on the Soul Emperor's face. But this smile was terrifying. Sheng Mai still remained silent. She only stood in the dark hall, looking like a sculpture of white jade that was enveloped in a black cloak. The Soul Emperor stared at Sheng Mai for 10 breaths of time and then chuckled as he shook his head. Your heartbeat remains the same and there isn't the slightest disturbance to your aura. Even the energy circulating within you is perfectly uniform. You really do not shame the reputation of being called my soul race's Soul Empress. However, the Soul Emperor's voice suddenly changed. The atmosphere around him turned icy cold, his entire body surging with killing intent. His filthy dark eyes turned murderous. I will not allow you to disobey me again. You should know just how valuable Lin Ming is to me. He is the key to opening my future. After so many years, I have discovered the turning point for all my ambitions. I will not allow anyone to ruin my plans. The Soul Emperor overflowed with killing intent, like cold winds that howled from the Nine Nether Abyss. As Sheng Mai faced this violent killing intent, her protective spirit essence trembled. She took a deep breath and looked at the Soul Emperor. Her voice was equally cold as she said, "You don't need to threaten me. I already have no other path to take. Your choice is also my choice." Although Sheng Mai said this, she still didn't know what taste was in her heart. In truth, this so-called choice was not hers alone, but one that Lin Ming helped her make. Rather, it could be said that Sheng Mai had already expected Lin Ming's choice, and she was simply using their conversation to once again steady her resolve. Good. Good. Very good. The Soul Emperor said, shouted out good 3 times. A worm that lives in the dead leaves and fallen branches will never understand the beauty and greatness of the world, because their field of vision is far too narrow and their life is far too short. They will never be able to live past the winter snows. I think you don't want to become such a worm. As the Soul Emperor spoke, he stepped forwards until he was a mere foot away from Sheng Mai. He wasn't tall and only had the appearance of a newly minted youth. As for Sheng Mai, she was tall. With that, their eyes were completely even with each other. As their eyes met, countless complex emotions were contained within Sheng Mai's gaze. The Soul Emperor's last words were also the words that Sheng Mai had spoken to Lin Ming. But compared to when she had said them, the feelings behind them were completely different. Time slowly passed. With the descent of the great calamity, waves would rise and winds would surge. These were troubled times. Overlords of the various universes were hatching their own plans, taking this one in several billion-year chance to realize their ambitions. Mortal desires were without end. In particular, the true divinities that stood at the peak of their universes. They had accumulated countless lucky chances and had passed through countless massacres, withstanding innumerable tribulations to arrive where they were. They weren't willing to meekly follow the road that fate had assigned them. They weren't willing to obey the samsara of the heavenly Tao. They wanted to control their own destinies, rising above the world and grasping the heavenly Tao in their hand. As for the Soul Emperor and Good Fortune Saint Sovereign, they were both among them. It's time. Chaos Star Ocean, Primal God Race Headquarters. The old God Sovereign stood on the edge of a stargazing platform, looked at the endless galaxies circulating around him. His old eyes seemed to see through the fog of the universe, peeking into the future fate of the God race. Reporting to Your Majesty God Sovereign, all people of the ancient remnant races have already boarded the Ark of Hope. This includes the God race's 22 million citizens, the Celestial race's 350 million citizens, the Roaring Bone race's 810 million citizens, the Titan race's 80 million citizens, the Ancient Spirit races. An Empyrean respectfully stood behind the old God Sovereign. Di Wuhen had stepped forwards, reporting everything to the old God Sovereign. The old God Sovereign slowly nodded. Do they all understand how dangerous this battle will be, and what it means to our ancient races? They understand. Di Wuhen responded with absolute surety. Everything is ready. We can break out at any time. Good. The old God Sovereign finally turned around. He slowly tidied his sleeves. On his sleeves, 3 pure black symbol papers were attached. These 3 symbol papers were God decrees personally drawn by the Azura Road Master. Seeing these 3 God decrees, all of the Empyreans present had changed complexions. These God decrees were their greatest trump cards in breaking through. Otherwise, they would have no way to overcome the hurdle that was the good fortune Saint Sovereign. Your Majesty. 3 Peak Empyreans stepped forwards together and knelt on the ground, their hands raised over their heads in reverence. Please bestow us the God decrees. You all, are you ready? The old God Sovereign looked at these 3 people, his tone ancient and powerful. As God decrees left behind by the Azura Roadmaster, wanting to activate them wasn't simple at all. If a true divinity galvanized them, they would be drained of strength. And if an Empyrean were to do so, they would affect their own life source and burn the fires of their lives, greatly diminishing their lifespan. Honorable Master, please bestow me a God decree. Di Wuhen stubbornly lifted his hands. It is not your turn. 2 elderly Peak Empyreans stood in front of Di Wuhen. Please grant them to us. Millimeter. The old God Sovereign looked at these 2 old God race Empyreans. They were already over 80 million years old. With a wave of his hand, 2 God decrees flew into the hands of the 2 Empyreans. The word of sealing as well as the word of striking, the 2 of you can take one. As for the last one, I will hold it myself. The old God Sovereign's voice echoed out. As Di Wuhen heard this, his heart shook and he quietly drew back. He knew that he could not change the decision of the old God Sovereign. Out of all the primal God races Peak Empyreans, he was the youngest. The young and those in their prime, they were the future of the God race after this great war. Let us go. The old God Sovereign took a deep breath. We will fight. In the starry black skies, the void was quiet and endless. Within the chaos star ocean that was filled with spacetime storms and black holes, a pure white spirit ship cut straight through space, flying out without slowing. At the center of this pure white spirit ship, there was a massive array disk. 12 Empyreans sat in a circle around this array disk, providing energy to the spirit ship. Countless energy stones burned within the array formation. Lin Ming stood outside the array formation, quietly watching all of this. Nearby, he could see the vast endlessness of space rapidly passing him by. It's begun. Lin Ming had a faint premonition that this battle to break through would be the spark that lit the explosive flames of war. The future of humanity, the future of the ancient races, as well as his own future, everything would depend on this battle. Reporting to Your Majesty, in front of us lies the Saint's space blockade. At the bow of the spirit ship, a messenger soldier from the Titan race reported the information. Run it over. The old God Sovereign simply and mercilessly replied. His voice carried a deep killing intent. As you will. The messenger soldier passed on the command. The entire spirit ship suddenly accelerated. Bang! With a loud explosion, the void shook. The Saint's space blockade had been directly ripped open. The Ark of Hope didn't slow in the least, piercing through the spatial barrier like an arrow through thin paper. This was the spirit ship left behind by the Azura Roadmaster and driven by numerous Empyreans. How could such a massive blockade possibly hope to stop it? Chapter 1898, Killing an Empyrean. Chapter 1898, Killing an Empyrean. Enemy attack. Amongst the fleet of the Saints, someone cried out loud. Hundreds of sound-transmitting talismans lit up together, rapidly passing down information through various channels. Who dares? They are courting death. Over 100 Saint martial artists rushed out. These people were mostly small battalion leaders and team commanders. They were originally enjoying themselves and playing around, and now that they suddenly heard the enemy was attacking, their festivities were interrupted and they naturally didn't feel well. These small group leaders were mostly all holy lords. As they saw a massive pure white spirit ship hurtling towards them, they all stared in a stunned daze. High-grade spirit ship. The Saint martial artist in the lead was a tall and fat man with a great world king cultivation. All things considered, he had good eyesight and was able to immediately recognize that this white spirit ship was extraordinary. It was as large as a small planet, and even though it was still hundreds of thousands of miles away, it was clearly visible. Do they want to break through the defensive line of our Godstep Heavenly Palace? Activate the defensive array formations and prepare to meet the enemy. Report to Empyrean Godstep what is happening. I think those God race bastards have finally become too bored. The fat great world king immediately ordered. These saint martial artists had gone through numerous battles. Although they were all boisterous and rowdy, when they truly met the enemy they wouldn't be lazy. They immediately opened the array formation to meet the incoming enemy. However, the white spirit ship didn't fire towards their battle array but hurtled in another direction. What? The fat great world king was stunned. That direction was where Godstep Heavenly Palace was. That Godstep Heavenly Palace was personally guarded by Empyrean Godstep. It had to be known that many Empyrean Heavenly Palaces were themselves top-grade magic tools. Their combat strength was amazing. Are they insane? Do they want to commit suicide? The fat great world king was dumbfounded. The other group leaders laughed. Nothing but trying to break a rock with an egg. They're just looking to die. With Empyrean Godstep status, he shouldn't be willing to meddle in such a battle. But if they are going to run up to his doorstep to die, no one's going to stop them. People chuckled as they spoke. However, the fat great world king's complexion was somewhat odd. The situation was too suspicious. That white spirit ship. As the fat great world king was thinking, something amazing occurred. The spirit ship shot towards Empyrean Godstep's heavenly palace and didn't seem to be slowing at all. From the current trajectory and speed, they were going to collide. Insane. The fat great world king was panic-stricken. Such a terrifying strike would absolutely cause a riotous detonation. After the array formation of a high-grade spirit ship exploded along with the massive amount of energy stones within, the energy shockwaves produced would suck up every nearby Holy Lord and tear them all to shreds. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Floating in space, Godstep Heavenly Palace began to shine with the luminescence of an array formation. Divine light shot out from within the Heavenly Palace. This was the Heavenly Palace's defensive array formation. With such a large-scale array formation in addition to the personal management of Empyrean Godstep, even the all-out strike of a peak Empyrean wouldn't be able to shake the barrier. But the fragile-seeming spirit ship continued rushing forwards. It was the suicidal appearance of someone trying to crack open a stone with an egg. This is suicide. Many people waited to see that white spirit ship crash and blow up into countless fireworks in the starry void. However, when the white spirit ship struck the array formation at high speed, the front of the spirit ship also shined with the light of an array formation. Infinite divine light gathered there, forming a massive blade. The blade recklessly tore through all. With a loud explosion, the Heavenly Palace's array formations were torn asunder. This was like a knife tearing through ordinary paper, without the least bit of resistance. Then, the white spirit ship fired forwards with unbelievable speed, straight into Godstep Heavenly Palace. Bang! The Heavenly Palace violently shook. The walls were ruthlessly torn through by the white spirit ship. The white spirit ship broke through, crashing into the Heavenly Palace. A monumental tide of energy swept out. In that single collision, countless saint martial artists within Godstep Heavenly Palace had perished. Even the world kings within were sucked in and injured. However, the white spirit ship continued forth with unstoppable momentum. With nearly constant speed, it pierced through the massive Godstep Heavenly Palace, penetrating all the way from one side to the other, bringing with it a brilliant detonation of fireworks as it passed through. This sort of feeling was like a javelin piercing right through a target. At that moment, the entire Godstep Heavenly Palace collapsed. Endless fragments were sent flying away as countless martial artists that were within Godstep Heavenly Palace were thrown into the cold vacuum of space. As for the white spirit ship, it was like a phoenix flying out from an inferno, continuing to race deep into the universe. Several hundred thousands of miles away, the fat great world king and the others looked on with horrified expressions, all of them scared witless. They thought that this was a futile battle and the white spirit ship would blow apart. But the white spirit ship had actually come out unscathed while the entire Godstep Heavenly Palace had been destroyed. The result was the complete opposite to what they had thought. Heavens, what is that? Who is it? From within the ruins of the destroyed Heavenly Palace, an angry and thunderous voice echoed outwards. A skinny man with a mane of white hair stepped out, chasing right after the white spirit ship. This skinny man's hawk-like eyes blazed with a severe light. He was Empyrean Godstep. His own heavenly palace had been ruined. How could he silently endure such an insult? "Break for me," the skinny man shouted and slapped out his palm. His palm transformed into a 1,000-mile palm that shined with a golden divine light, grasping towards the white spirit ship's driving array formation. He wanted to destroy the spirit ship's power source. Bang! The golden hand smashed against the white spirit ship. The spirit ship suddenly shook and slowed down. However, the tremendous impact carried Empyrean God step forwards. "Your Majesty, God Sovereign." Within the spirit ship, the Empyreans managing the driving array formation suddenly felt the spirit ship slow down, receiving a great resistance. "An upper Saint Empyrean is hindering our spirit ship from several tens of thousands of miles away. Erase him, quickly and decisively." The old God Sovereign's voice was as cold as ice. "Yes." 3 peak Empyreans received the order and flew out from the white spirit ship. Even for a peak Empyrean, wanting to instantly kill an upper Empyrean from tens of thousands of miles away was difficult. After all, even if the opponent couldn't fight, they could still run. But this time, one of the 3 peak Empyreans held a yellow symbol paper in his hand. This was a god decree left behind by an ordinary true divinity, but after being repaired by Lin Ming, its might could no longer be compared to how it was in the past. Divine light sparkled and the god decree lit up. At the same time, the 2 other peak Empyreans also assisted in the attack. 3 beams of divine light cut through the void, hurtling straight towards Empyrean Godstep with inconceivable speed. In particular, the central beam of light was overwhelming, tearing through the cosmos. Millimeter. Empyrean Godstep was alarmed. He could feel a terrifying strength within that middle divine light. Moreover, the strength of the 3 people attacking him had far surpassed his imagination. "This is bad." Empyrean Godstep cried out in shock. He rapidly drew backwards, but it was too late. The light that blossomed from the God decree was too dreadful. After it locked onto Empyrean Godstep, there was no way for him to avoid it. The brilliant divine light swallowed up Empyrean Godstep. Meanwhile, the attacks of the other 2 Empyreans also collided. The 3 attacks joined together, completely piercing through Empyrean Godstep's body. Empyrean Godstep howled pitifully. His mortal body was torn apart by the divine lights and his soul was annihilated. Like this, an Empyrean, and even an outstanding person amongst Empyreans, had been erased from existence, instantly killed in a horrifying manner. What? Hundreds of thousands of miles away, the fat great world king's heart shriveled as he saw this. In his lifetime, this was the first time he had ever seen an Empyrean die, and an upper Empyrean at that. In ordinary times, an Empyrean was no different from a god in their eyes, an unreachable existence. But in that brief moment just then, an upper Empyrean had been instantly killed, turned to nothing but ashes and smoke. This frightening scene caused the fat great world king to freeze where he was, looking like a statue. And beside the fat great world king, the other martial artists weren't able to withstand such a sight. They shivered and a cold sweat dripped down their bodies. Just what kind of spirit ship was that? With a single move it was able to erase an upper Empyrean. The ancient races, have they all emerged from their nest? The fat world king suddenly realized this possibility. The ancient races finally weren't willing to resign themselves to being encircled and were planning to break free. Quickly report the news. The fat great world king's mind was in utter chaos. He began to realize that this opening salvo would be the fire that lit the fuse for the final decisive battle between the saints and the ancient races. In fact, it wasn't just the fat great world king who realized this. From the destroyed Godstep heavenly palace, many world kings had rapidly sent out news of what happened. This sudden change of events would soon reach the ears of the good fortune Saint Sovereign. Chapter 1899, Famine. Chapter 1899, Famine. Deep within the Primeval universe, within the center of an icy metal planet, the good fortune Saint Sovereign sat atop a massive blood-red sphere that was 10,000 miles wide. This crimson sphere constantly wriggled. Fierce dragon heads jutted out from the bloody sphere before melting back into it with a rain of blood, repeating this process again and again. At the same time, Loud sounds rang out from within the center of the crimson sphere. Bang! 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 With the thunderous roaring of the earth, the entire planet vibrated with this sound. The terrifying sound echoed through the semi-sealed interior of the planet. If a martial artist with an insufficient cultivation were to stand in this space, they would be affected by the horrifying high-energy sound waves. Their body and organs would resonate with the sound waves until they turned to mush. In this environment, a young man knelt before the good fortune Saint Sovereign, his hands splayed on the ground in reverence. "Your Majesty, Sovereign Ancestor, your child requests to go to battle." This young man had already been kneeling here for a long time. He was tall, with broad shoulders. His facial features were sharp and fierce, a faint hostility creeping in his eyes. This youth was the person who had been defeated by Lin Ming in the past, the good fortune Saint Sun. In that 100-year duel, when only 60 years had passed, the good fortune Saint Sun had been defeated by Lin Ming. Not only had he been defeated, he had lost in a miserable fashion. In the face of numerous people with the Empyreans of the Saint race, human race, monster race, and demon race present, the good fortune Saint Sun had been publicly cuckolded by Lin Ming. His fiancée was stolen and he was beaten to a pulp. This event would forever be the greatest shame in his life. Now, 20 to 30 years had passed. The good fortune Saint Sun had endured this humiliation, torturing himself, diligently training, all for the fervent wish he had of wiping away that shame. But Lin Ming seemed to have disappeared without a trace. No one was able to find him. It was only a few days ago that the good fortune Saint Sun learned Lin Ming had entered the Primeval universe. With this he could no longer sit still, thus he requested to be sent to the battlefront by the good fortune Saint Sovereign. However, the good fortune Saint Sovereign didn't respond. And just now, he also learned that the ancient races were riding a top-grade spirit ship to break through their encirclement. Because of this, the good fortune Saint Sun volunteered himself for battle once more. "Your Majesty, Sovereign Ancestor, your child can confirm that Lin Ming is riding aboard that white spirit ship." The reason Lin Ming came to the Primeval universe should have been in order to form an alliance with the ancient remnant races. It even seems that Lin Ming has convinced the leaders of the ancient races. They should be trying to escape the Primeval universe and flee to the divine realm to meet up with the humans. As Lin Ming's rival, the good fortune Saint Sun had somewhat of an understanding of Lin Ming. He was already able to guess part of the truth. However, the good fortune Saint Sovereign shook his head. "You are not Lin Ming's match. You have diligently cultivated for 20-some years, but even now, the disparity between you and him has only grown larger." The good fortune Saint Sovereign's words were like a bucket of cold water tossed atop the good fortune Saint Sun's head. The good fortune Saint Sun gripped his fists. Although he didn't want to acknowledge it, he was well aware of just how terrifying Lin Ming was. In the past, Lin Ming was able to jump ranks to defeat him and he was younger, in the prime of his youth. Now, over the past 20-some years, the disparity would only have grown larger and larger. The good fortune Saint Sun grit his teeth, saying, "I might not be his match, but I do not need to defeat him head-on. As long as I can lead the army to rout him on the battlefield and kill him there, that will equally restore my heart of martial art. I beg your Majesty, Sovereign Ancestor, to allow your child to command the troops into battle." The good fortune Saint Sun deeply bowed. But, the good fortune Saint Sovereign continued shaking his head. "You don't need to be so stubborn. Many times, when a peerless genius reaches the final stage of their growth and must comprehend the laws of the heavens and earth and step onto the road of divinity, leading a smooth life without problems and bumps isn't necessarily good. Martial artists are creatures that need setbacks at times, just like a phoenix needs to undergo nirvana. Your road has been far too smooth. Experiencing such a strike might not be bad for you. As for Lin Ming, he is the same. Although he had experienced some hurdles as he grew, compared to chasing after the heavenly Tao, all his problems have been insignificant so far. You and Lin Ming both need to fail. However, you have me standing behind you, so even if you are defeated you can start over from nothing. As for Lin Ming, he has no one behind him. Once he is defeated, there is nothing but death." As the good fortune Saint Sovereign spoke to here, the massive blood-red monster beneath his body seemed to have become infected by his aura. The monster wriggled more and more, causing the entire planet to shake. Go, it's time to end this charade. I will not allow a mere human boy to destroy my plans. Before he has grown, I will kill him. Killing intent erupted from the good fortune Saint Sovereign, recklessly gushing out like a tide. The good fortune Saint's son, who was less than 10 feet from the good fortune Saint Sovereign, felt his heart chill, as if he had fallen into the nine-nether abyss. Even he had never earnestly felt the horrifying might of the good fortune Saint Sovereign like today. Woo. The crimson monster wriggled more and more. The tiny remaining amount of the blood pond rapidly dried up. The blood pond had been absorbed by the crimson monster, completely swallowed up. On the surface of the monster's body, massive runes began to appear. And, the divine light that these runes shot out all gathered between the good fortune Saint Sovereign's eyebrows. In that moment, a rune also appeared between the good fortune Saint Sovereign's eyebrows. This rune was gold, similar to the runes that covered the monster's body. Could it be? The good fortune Saint's son was shocked upon seeing this. He could clearly feel that at this time, the spiritual sea of the crimson monster had become one with the good fortune Saint Sovereign's. Bang! 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 With a terrifying explosive sound, from the crimson ball beneath the good fortune Saint Sovereign's feet, dozens of fierce red dragon heads rushed out. These fierce dragons roared with overweening power, breaking into the walls of the metal planet. The entire planet violently shook. The wicked red dragons tore apart the earth. Endless energy shot out, firing into the vast nothingness of space. If one watched this planet from millions of miles away, they would see something horrifying occur. The planet began quietly collapsing from within, and in the cracks of the disintegrating planet, boundless blood-red light filled the air, becoming thicker and thicker until the entire planet was swallowed. This sort of feeling was like a monster being born from a mother, but because the monster was too powerful, it even swallowed the mother. This. Seeing such a vast and horrifying sight, the good fortune Saint's son's mind shook. The crimson monster was devouring a planet. The holy beast of my race. Famine, the good fortune Saint's son gulped. Your Majesty, Saint Ancestor, have you already established a spiritual connection with the holy beast? You can control it. The good fortune Saint's son was panic-stricken. He had long known of the existence of their saint race's holy beast. Rumors said that this holy beast was originally an extremely terrifying existence even amongst abyssals. Its full name was the abyssal demon, famine, and its special attribute was to devour all. The abyss of the ancient ruins was a dreadful place, so frightening that no one could understand it. The entrance was blocked off by a terrifying enchantment. This enchantment was called the heaven-sealing enchantment. The heaven-sealing enchantment was said to contain the phantoms of the Azura Roadmaster and the Holy Scripture Creator. Through any reasoning, even an abyssal that surpassed the realm of a peak Empyrean would be unable to break past the heaven-sealing enchantment. But famine had emerged. As for how it did so, no one knew. There was only one truth, that after famine left the abyss, its strength had precipitously fallen. Even so, it still possessed a dreadful strength capable of swallowing most true divinities. The appearance of famine set off an unprecedented disaster for the saint. It swallowed a massive number of saint powerhouses and countless saint martial artists, eating them up to make itself more powerful. But finally, the saint race's ancient Saint Sovereign had led many true divinities to join forces and besiege famine with overwhelming strength. Finally, famine was grievously wounded. Even 90% of its recovered origin energy had disappeared. Even so, the saints weren't able to destroy famine. In this situation, famine then signed a contract with the ancient Saint Sovereign. This was an equal contract. The saints would look for blood and food for famine to devour, and famine would fight on behalf of the saint. Like this, famine became the holy beast of the saints. The saints were always ambitious. They wanted to rule the 33 heavens. However, in the Great War 6 billion years ago when the saints fought the humans, the saints had paid a dire price. Your Majesty, Saint Ancestor, wasn't famine heavily wounded in the battle 6 billion years ago by Empyrean divine seal burning away his life as the price? Ever since, famine has fallen into a deep slumber. How did you manage to awaken it? The good fortune Saint Sun couldn't believe his own eyes. More than one Saint Empyrean had wanted to awaken famine, but they had all failed. But now, the good fortune Saint Sovereign had not only awakened famine, but even seemed to have gained control of it. This left the good fortune Saint Sun gasping in disbelief. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A series of terrifying explosions continued. From that giant spherical body of blood, more and more blood dragon tentacles stretched out, digging into the earth of the metal planet and recklessly swallowing its energy. Strength streamed into famine's body. But the entire planet withered away. Its origin energy dried up, the seas evaporated, and massive fissures raced through the world. Even the dried-up land that had lost all spiritual energy was completely swallowed by famine. Like this, a giant planet that was tens of thousands of miles in radius was eaten by famine. This process lasted less than a quarter hour of time. Such a drastic change in the world left the good fortune Saint Sun struggling to compose himself. Although he had heard that famine possessed the ability to swallow worlds, stories were only stories. Now that he saw these stories come to life with his own eyes, he was utterly shocked. To pierce through a planet wasn't difficult, but crushing apart a planet was hard. As for completely swallowing up a planet, what sort of mighty power was that? As a martial artist who wholeheartedly chased after the peak of martial arts, the good fortune Saint Sun had a zealous obsession with strength. If only this strength was his own, how wonderful would that be? At this time, the good fortune Saint Sun discovered that the good fortune Saint Sovereign's feet had submerged into the blood of famine at some unknown time. Rather, it was more accurate to say that he didn't submerge, but the good fortune Saint Sovereign's mortal body had already fused together with the blood plasma of famine, sharing blood vessels. Ha! The good fortune Saint Sovereign coldly sneered. On his neck, blood vessels rose up like red worms, making him look fearsome to the extreme. Swallowing a planet is nothing. 6 billion years ago, when famine was in its peak state, it even swallowed up the destiny of the human bloodline, in other words, one of humanity's heavenly Taos, the 9 stars of the Tao Palace. The good fortune Saint Sovereign's words were stunning. The good fortune Saint Sun was also shocked. He had never heard about this chapter of history before. Chapter 1900, Azura Primal God Canon. Chapter 1900, Azura Primal God Canon. In ancient times, human martial artists had been exceptionally strong. Besides the essence gathering system, humans also had high achievements in the body transformation system. The body transformation system. That was, the first 6 levels of body transformation, followed by the 8 inner hidden gates and then the 9 stars of the Tao Palace. Many human martial artists chose to walk the road of body transformation. Some human martial artists even chose to dual cultivate body and energy. In this era, numerous human elites rose up. But afterwards, in the Great Calamity 6 billion years ago, the rules of the heavens and earth changed and humanity's road of body transformation instead became a curse upon them. It became rare for people to break into the 8 inner hidden gates. As for breaking into the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, that was nigh impossible. This was why humanity from then on had referred to those who chose to take the route of body transformation as defying the heavens. Even in the 6 billion years that followed, a mere 2 humans had ever managed to break into the 9 stars of the Tao Palace. One of them was Empyrean Primordius, who relied on the flesh and blood refining Grand Mist Spirit Bead to break through. The other person was Lin Ming. Although he didn't possess the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, he had inherited Empyrean Primordius' legacy and wishes. Moreover, there was Xiao Moxian, who had given him her primal yin energy and pure phoenix blood, causing Lin Ming's inner yin and yang to become harmonized. With that, Lin Ming had finally been able to break past the chains of the heavenly Tao. And if there was a reason for all these hurdles, it was because the rules of the heavenly Tao had changed 6 billion years ago. In the past, when the saints invaded humanity, many Empyreans and true divinities had poured their strength into famine and had it swallow one of humanity's heavenly Taos, forcefully severing the connection between humanity and the 33 heavenly Tao's 9 stars of the Tao Palace. To change the heavenly Tao and the destiny of an entire race, that was a dreadful might which neared the level of a beyond divinity existence. And ever since that great war, the human race which had lost the ability to cultivate the 9 stars of the Tao Palace was like a person who had an arm chopped off. Following that, inheritances that involved the 9 stars of the Tao Palace were also slowly lost to time. Moreover, in that great war, Empyrean Divine Seal and numerous other human Empyreans had sacrificed themselves, causing innumerable inheritances to be destroyed and many holy lands to be annihilated. The result was that the human race began to decline ever since. As for the saints and spiriters, one race possessed the Primeval Realm ruins and the other possessed the Akashic Dream universe. These 2 races became stronger and stronger. In terms of population, humanity could still be considered one of the 3 peak races. But in terms of strength, the human race was far inferior to the saints and the spiriters. If famine managed to swallow one of the humans' heavenly Taos, how come my saint race wasn't able to thoroughly conquer humanity in the Great Calamity 6 billion years ago? The abyssal demon famine had already begun racing deep into the universe. Its speed was unbelievable, swiftly passing through the endless void. The good fortune Saint Sun stood atop famine's planet-sized body, asking a question to the good fortune Saint Sovereign. In the war 6 billion years ago, the only universe that the humans managed to defend was the Divine Realm. In the Divine Realm, my saint race suffered defeat after defeat. If there was a reason for this, then it would have been the leader of humanity at the time, Divine Seal. I have no idea what lucky chance he found, but his strength was even able to suppress the ancient Saint Sovereign. Amongst true divinities he was almost unrivaled. He led the true divinities of humanity to violently clash with the true divinities of the saints, even suppressing us. But afterwards, the ancient Saint Sovereign used famine to devour humanity's heavenly Tao of the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, drastically weakening them. However, Empyrean Divine Seal was able to meld his Divine Seal art with the ancient Elysium Seal in a massive array formation. He took advantage of the fact that famine had used up the majority of its energy to swallow the heavenly Tao in order to directly seal away famine's soul. This is the reason why famine fell into a deep slumber ever since that war and had become impossible to awaken. Over so many hundreds of millions of years, many peerless saint sovereigns appeared amongst the saints, but none of them were able to awaken famine. Famine, which had lost its soul, then turned into a massive sea of blood called Famine Sea. Many Saint Empyreans didn't know what the use of this wild sea was, but the truth was that it was famine's true body. Originally, I also didn't have the ability to awaken famine. But that changed when I obtained the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. Using the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, I swallowed in a large portion of famine's flesh and blood essence and fused it into my body. Like this, I connected to the bloodline of famine and was able to have my spirit mark be remembered in the depths of his soul. Now, famine has already become controlled by my spirit mark. It is almost my avatar. Speaking to hear, the good fortune Saint Sovereign's voice filled with terror. His face, neck, chest, all were covered with bulging blood vessels. The blood vessels pulsated, making him look like a demon. The good fortune Saint Sovereign clenched his fist together, as if the entire universe would be held in his hand. With famine as my avatar, in the vast space of the 33 heavens no one can stop me. The good fortune Saint Sovereign's voice echoed through the cosmos. With his energy as a medium, it spread for millions of miles, causing planets to shake. Characters on the level of the good fortune Saint Sovereign each had their own deep ambitions. In this great calamity when the God-lamenting wall vanished all over, a majority of the 33 heavens universes had nearly merged into one whole. Infinite mystic realms opened, allowing nearly endless resources to be plundered from them. Everything that could not be obtained before was now obtainable. This was the turning point for everyone to realize their ambitions. At this time, innumerable trillions of miles away, the Ark of Hope had already begun a life-or-death battle with the main forces of the Saint. Saint Empyreans appeared one after another, all of them trying to stop the Ark of Hope. The Ark of Hope was a supreme treasure, a beyond divinity-level spirit ship. However, those driving it were only God-race Empyreans. In the hands of Empyreans, the Ark of Hope could only display a minuscule amount of its true strength. Bang! With a loud explosion, the Ark of Hope broke into an array formation created by several peak Saint Empyreans working together. its speed instantly plummeted 30%. Ca. Energy fiercely collided. Divine light brilliantly burnt around the Ark of Hope, making it seem as if they had plunged into a sun. Everyone attack together, stop that ship. On the Saint Race's side, a peak Empyrean sent out a sound transmission. They had paid such a great price to encircle the ancient remnant races, how could they possibly allow them to escape in the final moment? 3 peak Empyreans as well as 15 middle and upper Empyreans behind them gathered together, forming a battle array. With over 18 Empyreans and each one an outstanding existence amongst Empyreans, the might of the battle array they formed could be imagined. In the blink of an eye they could even turn a planet that was hundreds of thousands of miles wide into dust. Looking at the powerful foes looming before them as well as the terrifying array formation, the old god sovereign's complexion was cold. Prepare. The Azura primal god cannon. The Ark of Hope was not some simple transportation spirit ship. Massive array formations were carved into its hull and it came with a dreadful weapon. That was the Azura primal god cannon. Just the Azura primal god cannon itself was also another beyond divinity level supreme treasure. When all the great array formations on the Ark of Hope were activated, the energy of the Azura primal god cannon would accumulate to its limits. Once the Azura primal god cannon emitted a shot, it could easily destroy a star. The subsequent explosion that followed would spread for trillions of quadrillions of miles, eventually destroying the entire galaxy. Unfortunately, the god race Empyreans were unable to display the true strength of the Azura primal god cannon. Otherwise, let alone the battle array of these Empyreans, they would even be able to trample over the good fortune Saint Sovereign. For a time, countless precious energy stones lit up. They were thrown into the Ark of Hope's array formation without a care of cost, all of them burning together. Within the array formation, a giant ancient black cannon appeared. The barrel of this cannon was carved with countless Azura runes, each one making the mind shake with fear. The Azura primal god cannon was a magic tool personally refined by the Azura Roadmaster in the past. As it appeared, a horrifying pressure exuded outwards, passing through the void and causing all the Saint Empyreans to tremble at its killing intent. What is that? The Saint Empyreans saw the Azura primal god cannon on the bow of the Ark of Hope lock onto them. As they were fixated in its sights, they felt as if they were being glared at by the god of death. For a time, the infinite energy of the universe turned into motes of lights that gathered into the Azura primal god cannon. Then, the void collapsed. With a deafening roar, the ancient primal god cannon shot out a beam of light that was hundreds of thousands of miles thick, piercing through space. Catcher. With a furious rumble, the void collapsed like thin ice. Looking from far away, all one could see was endless divine light. Even one's divine sense couldn't see through this light, as everything was completely twisted up by the terrifying energy storm. Ah! 2 Saint Empyreans cried out in pain. As their bodies were covered by the light of the Azura primal god cannon, they were instantly reduced to ashes. Even the powerful mortal bodies of Saint Empyreans couldn't resist the impact of the Azura primal god cannon. A single bombardment had directly killed 2 Saint Empyreans. For a time, the might of the Azura primal god cannon frightened and deterred all present. Chapter 1901. Blast Through the Void. Chapter 1901. Blast Through the Void. Damn it. In these past years, numerous Saint Empyreans had fought through the Primeval universe while suffering little damage. But in this battle, 3 of them had already died before much fighting had even occurred. Moreover, they were all upper Empyreans. Upon reaching the level of an Empyrean, wanting to defeat a similar opponent wasn't difficult. However, wanting to kill one was a completely different matter. After all, every person that managed to reach the heights of an Empyrean was an extreme talent that was blessed with a great destiny. They had experienced innumerable lucky chances as they grew and had countless life-saving cards hidden up their sleeves. And their own defensive capabilities were particularly powerful, their life force almost unparalleled in tenacity. But such characters had been instantly annihilated to dust upon facing the White Spirit ship, killed without a chance to react. This left the rest of them frightened. It had to be known that in the all-out war between the humans and Saints 3.6 billion years ago, The Saints only had several hundred Empyreans die, and most of them were lower Empyreans and middle Empyreans. Now, to lose 3 upper Empyreans like this, the losses were mind-boggling. Several other Empyreans were also severely injured. Their combat strength had weakened. However, their mortal bodies were formidable and their regenerative abilities were outstanding. These wounds slowly healed. That spirit ship, how can it be so strong? Just what sort of ancient treasure is that terrifying? Several Empyreans felt fear rise in their hearts. Before this, they were already accustomed to the ancient remnant races scattering to flee upon the beginning of a fight as they were all immediately routed. To the Saints, invading the Primeval universe was the same as beating up a crippled man. It was a completely overwhelming and one-sided battle. They had never experienced such frustration before. Slow them down but do not face them head-on. Be careful of that god cannon. The ancient races have countless treasures. Once they die they are all ours. A peak Empyrean sent out a sound transmission. At this time, more and more Saint Empyreans were catching up. The Saints possessed 7 universes, each universe having Empyreans that numbered in the triple digits. With all the universes added together they had over 1,000 Empyreans. This was an incomparably terrifying strength. Compared to this, the ancient races were far too weak. Even with all of them combined together, they only had several dozen Empyreans, even less than humanity. In the cannon blast just now, how much energy was used up? The old god sovereign calmly asked as he stood before the Azura primal god cannon's array formation. Approximately 2%. At most we can send out 20 cannon blasts. We have to retain at least 60% energy for our protective barriers and the flight array formation. Moreover, if we fire the cannon too many times, we will also consume a considerable amount of strength. The Azura primal god cannon could burn energy stones to attack, but it needed an Empyrean to manage the array formation. In order to operate a beyond divinity level magic weapon, the pressure it placed on the Empyreans could be imagined. 20 strikes. The old god sovereign placed his palms together, wrapping his fingers as he was lost in thought. Without a doubt, there was a massive disparity in strength between the ancient races and the Saints. It was impossible to make up for this difference by depending on the Ark of Hope alone. Even if they sent out another 20 cannon blasts, they wouldn't be able to kill many more Empyreans. This was because the Saint Empyreans were now wary and would avoid the direction of the Azura primal god cannon. This made killing these Saint Empyreans far more difficult. Rush out. Don't try to fight them. The old god sovereign was incredibly calm. The Ark of Hope was the only thing they could rely on to escape, so they had to avoid the Saints as much as they could. As long as they could break out of the encirclement and penetrate past the spatial barrier that surrounded the Chaos Star Ocean, they could use the Ark of Hope to warp forwards with a greater void shift. With that, they would be provided temporary safety. But the Saint Empyreans wouldn't let the ancient races do as they wished. In the void of the Primeval universe, everyone was far away from each other. The low-level martial artists had long since fled, leaving behind only the Empyreans. Only an Empyrean-level martial artist could play a role in fighting the Ark of Hope. A blinding divine light wove through the starry void. Astral essence swelled forth, gushing out like a growing galaxy. Many Empyreans attacked together. The scene was dazzling to the eyes. Slow them down, delay for time. 2 peak Saint Empyreans thrust out their hands. Golden astral essence transformed into giant palms that grabbed onto the Ark of Hope's hull. These 2 Empyreans attacked from a tricky angle. They avoided the Azura primal god cannon and chose a relatively safe area. Soon after, another peak Empyrean summoned a magic tool. This magic tool was a large bronze bell. The bell rolled like an oncoming thunderstorm, smashing into the Ark of Hope. Bam! With a loud explosion, the giant bell smashed into the Ark of Hope's defensive barrier. The bell collapsed and was sent tumbling away. Although the Ark of Hope wasn't damaged, the ship had used up a great deal of energy. Everyone strike. Move as far back as you can to attack and use up the ship's energy. This ship should be a peak true divinity spirit treasure. Although breaking it is impossible, As long as we can exhaust its energy supplies, then that ridiculous pack of dead ancient races will be nothing but a turtle in a jar. We will be able to kill them as we please." The Peak Empyrean who threw the bell shined with a golden light, his voice indifferent as he spoke. "Ha, that's right, we don't need to frontally face them at all." The Saint Empyreans all drew back, cold sneers on their face. They pulled out all sorts of magic tools, and soon endless divine light enveloped the entire void for millions of miles. The Ark of Hope's energy was slowly consumed. The Empyreans managing the array formation also consumed their soul force. The ancient race Empyreans were fighting an enemy with 10 times their numbers. Bang! The Azura primal god cannon blasted out once more. The thick beam of light pierced through the void, causing a horrifying energy storm to roll up. However, the Saint Empyreans were already prepared. They could keenly feel the Azura primal god cannon gathering energy and were able to move away a step ahead. Only a lower Empyrean, because he was too slow and his sense wasn't too sharp, was sucked up into that energy storm. After being pulled into the horrifying energy storm, that lower Empyreans was immediately reduced to ashes. Damn! One of the god race Empyreans managing the Azura primal god cannon pounded his fist onto the array formation's altar. "The magic tool left behind by my ancestors has been shamed beneath my hands. Although the energy is powerful, my abilities are lacking and I cannot kill this damned pack of dogs." The Azura primal god cannon was too high-grade a weapon. If the martial artists of the ancient remnant races wanted to operate it, they simply lacked the ability to freely use it. They were no different from little children picking up heavy axes and trying to wield them. It required far too much energy to lift the axe and their dexterity was lacking. As long as someone was fast enough and moved just a little, they could easily avoid the strike. In front of the array formation's altar, Lin Ming silently looked upon all of this. He was rapidly replaying the 2 blasts of the Azura primal god cannon. The shimmering lights of the array formation's runes reappeared in his mind as he constantly analyzed them. Then, with another explosion, the hull trembled. The Saint Empyreans were barraging the protective barrier of the Ark of Hope. Once the protective barrier was destroyed, the Saint Empyreans could even invade the Ark of Hope and fight directly with those on board. Once that happened, the 10 billion plus members of the ancient remnant races on board would be slaughtered like lambs at the butcher, recklessly killed. The hull's energy had been reduced to 95%. Someone reported. A gloomy cloud covered the old god sovereign's face. The leaders of the other ancient races also appeared ill. This was because the good fortune Saint Sovereign had yet to appear. The truth was that all the powerhouses present had already decided to bet their lives on this battle and were willing to give up their lives if needed. But if they used up all of their strength before the good fortune Saint Sovereign appeared, then their sacrifice would be meaningless. The ancient races had already come to this point. All the Empyreans present, especially the elderly ones, no longer feared death. Death was not frightening, what was frightening was dying without meaning. "Let me try." At this time, a hesitant and slightly unsure voice sounded out. Everyone turned. The one speaking was the only person in the central control room of the Ark of Hope that didn't even have a World King cultivation, Lin Ming. "You want to control the Azura primal god cannon?" The eyes of some of the elderly leaders lit up. Lin Ming had conjured numerous miracles already. If he were to propose something like this, everyone's first reaction was hoping that he could create a miracle once more. Lin Ming slowly nodded, his eyes still unsure. While he had studied the Azura primal god cannon's array formation before this, he hadn't obtained any substantial results. The array formation was too unwieldy and the laws involved were far too profound. Moreover, the requirement of absolute strength was extremely high. After all, Lin Ming had yet to study the complete Azura Sutra. He wasn't omnipotent. "I can only say I can try, and I will also need your assistance. My strength is far too lacking to activate the Azura primal god cannon. I can only try to steer the direction so it is more accurate," Lin Ming discreetly said after deeply thinking over it. "Great." Hearing Lin Ming's words, many ancient race martial artists immediately perked up, their lowered morale somewhat restored. In a corner of the room, Smokeless watched all of this occur, a strange light flashing in her eyes. She discovered that unknowingly, Lin Ming's status within the ancient remnant races had become invaluable. Every word and action he took could inspire morale within the Empyreans. This was almost unthinkable. Open the array. The old god sovereign looked at Lin Ming, a wizened and affectionate smile on his face. Like the name of this spirit ship, what the ancient remnant races needed was hope. And the peerless elites of the younger generation were the source of this hope. With Lin Ming here, the old god sovereign felt much more at ease. His life was already winding down to its end. Even if he didn't live to see the day that the ancient races overcame the great calamity, he could still die in peace. Wong wong wong. Beneath the constant barrage of the saints, the Azura primal god cannon's array formation activated once more. For a time, the scattered energy within the universe began to crazily stir. The energy in the Primeval universe was thin, but these energies were varied and profound, with all sorts of origin energies contained within it. Like a whale drinking water, all of these energies rolled up towards the Ark of Hope. To absorb as much energy from the universe as possible while keeping the energy use of the Ark of Hope to the barest minimum, this was one of the changes Lin Ming made to the Azura primal god cannon's array formation while operating it. Of course, this change was all based upon Lin Ming's profound understanding into the Azura laws. Chapter 1902, Guide. Chapter 1902, Guide. More and more energy accumulated. Lin Ming's complexion was solemn, his composure dignified. To borrow the strength of so many Empyreans and manage such a high-grade array formation, this was a tremendous consumption to his divine soul. If it weren't for Lin Ming having adventured through the soul world for over 20 years, experiencing the ancient galactic battlefield twice and grasping the principles atop the fallen god mountain range, he would have found it impossible to persist. Here they come, they're trying the same old trick again, why not try something new? As the Azura primal god cannon began condensing energy, many Saint Empyreans immediately noticed it. Avoid the muzzle. Have that blast hit empty space. Those ancient race retards, while we're worrying about how to consume their spirit ship's energy, they actually do something so stupid like wasting their energy to attack us. That's just what we want. Although many Saint Empyreans were speaking in a relaxed manner, the truth was that no one underestimated their opponent. They each used their own methods to avoid the Azura primal god cannon. Some distorted space, using the space laws to erratically drift from place to place and making it impossible to latch onto their position. Some people created layers upon layers of illusions, making it impossible to find their true body. Some people even took out hundreds of puppets to block the line of sight. There were even those that laid down illusory magic arrays to hide themselves. The Empyreans present were all outstanding individuals even amongst elites. Before this, they had experienced 2 blasts already and had found out the general rules in order to dodge it. Thus, the methods they used to avoid became increasingly sophisticated, and even lower Empyreans with enough experience were confident they wouldn't be sucked into the blast. These devious bastards. Seeing the originally distant and blurry Saint Empyreans vanish or create layers of illusions, the ancient race martial artists all had ugly complexions. Lin Ming remained tranquil as he watched all of this. His hands guided the energy gathered by the ancient race Empyreans as he carefully sensed the Azura primal god cannon's array formation. This array diagram was all-encompassing and included numerous laws of the universe's void. Calming his mind, Lin Ming's consciousness seemed to stand in the void of space. Beneath his feet was the Azura primal god cannon's array formation. This array diagram spread out in his mind, covering the surrounding space for countless millions of miles, forming a comprehensive spatial projection in his mind. And all life within this array diagram, including himself, including the ancient races, including the saints, was shown within this projection without a single omission. Lin Ming didn't hurry. He closed his eyes, his mind like a placid lake. His mind tightly wove together with the Azura primal god cannon's array formation, rapidly catching the projection of every person. Slowly, he locked onto a position. In this position there were 9 Saint Empyreans, and each one had a cultivation of a middle Empyrean or above. Here it is. Within the array diagram, Lin Ming's eyes suddenly flashed open, a cold killing intent bursting out from them. From his body, the energy gathered by the ancient race Empyreans started to rush out without reserve. With Lin Ming as the guide and the energy from the many Empyreans as the power source, he began to activate the Azura primal god cannon. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The entire arc of hope vibrated. Heaven and earth origin energy began to condense in space, forming innumerable spheres of light, all of various sizes. These spheres of light came in different colors, each one representing different types of energy. Now, they all gathered into the Azura primal god cannon as they were inhaled into it. For a time, the Azura primal god cannon emitted a divine light in all directions, as if a sun were being born within. What a death wish! A Saint Empyrean sneered. He could feel that the energy within the Azura primal god cannon was over twice as large as that of the two previous strikes. The more they consume energy, the quicker they will die. Everyone be careful, especially lower Empyreans. Make sure to avoid their attacks and have this bunch of ancient race idiots fail. The Saint Empyreans communicated to each other with sound transmissions, rapidly flying back and forth in the distance. And at this time, the Azura primal god cannon erupted. Bang! A terrifying explosion echoed out, as if 100,000 god beasts were roaring out as one. In that moment, the world seemed to lose its color. A beam of divine light millions of miles long lit up the void, seeming as if it would cause the universe to collapse. The brilliant light could even pierce through and blind a world king's eyes. For a moment, the Saint Empyreans felt as if their five senses had been stripped away. Their hearts shook. On reflex, they all drew backwards. This is bad. Some people realized that this cannon blast wasn't the same. The Saint Empyreans present were all elites. Although their senses were eliminated, they still had their own methods to feel danger in the ruinous tide of energy. However, as their divine sense touched upon the massive beam of light emitted by the Azura primal god cannon, all of them were left panic-stricken. What? They watched as the beam of light split apart in the void. 1 divided to 3, 3 divided to 9, and then each beam of light changed paths, separately veering off into 9 directions, shooting towards their targets like the arrows of a divine god. And in these 9 directions, each place had an Empyrean that was locked onto by a divine light. In that instant, no matter what illusion they used, no matter what technique or avatar ability they tried, no matter how they twisted the void, all of their attempts of evasion were utterly destroyed by the Azura heavenly Tao laws, leaving them without a place to hide. Even those Saint Empyreans that weren't aimed at felt a sharp and severe light shoot towards their heads. It was like a person had pointed a cold sword at their heads, ready to kill them in the next moment. Ah! An Empyrean cried out miserably. The divine lights were far too fast. The Empyreans had been able to avoid the cannon blasts not because they were faster, but because they had calculated the avoidance path ahead of time. But now that they were directly focused on by the divine light, this was a completely different situation. The Empyrean that cried out was punctured by a beam of divine light. His body instantly evaporated to ashes as he blew up in a cascade of fireworks. Following that, more and more fireworks lit up the void. Saint Empyreans were killed off by the Azura primal god cannon one after another. An Empyrean that hid in a spatial distortion didn't even have time to cry out. The spatial distortion he hid in was pierced through. The space barrier he made simply wasn't able to block the Azura primal god cannon. Among the others, those that had used an illusory magic array or released puppets were all annihilated without exception, instantly slain where they stood. Only a peak Empyrean, the one who had struck the Arc of Hope with the giant bell before, was able to use his terrifying strength to forcefully avoid the killing trajectory of the Azura primal god cannon. Bang! The divine bell covered him. Half the energy from the shockwaves of the Azura primal god cannon were absorbed by this peak Empyrean spirit treasure. The divine bell caved in and the spirit treasure nearly twisted in half. Within, the divine bell old man bled from every orifice. He rapidly retreated in distress. By taking severe wounds and almost ruining his spirit treasure as the price, he had avoided the final fatal blow. In a brief moment, of the 9 Empyreans that were locked onto by the Azura primal god cannon, 8 had died and a 9th was severely wounded. The 8 Empyreans that died were all middle or upper Empyreans, and the one that was injured was a peak Empyrean. Lin Ming hadn't bothered attacking the lower Empyreans. Because, it just wasn't worth it. This. Among the saints, many Empyreans were completely shell-shocked. Even the divine Bell old man who had managed to survive the disaster hadn't managed to recover his scattered wits yet. His face was pale. No one had expected that the might of the cannon blast would reach such a degree. In the blink of an eye, 8 Empyreans had perished. Just what sort of concept was that? Even the all-out strike of a true divinity might not be able to replicate such an effect. Within the Ark of Hope, the ancient race martial artists were all overjoyed by the cannon blast. Well struck. That felt great. Currently, there were only 100 to 200 Saint Empyreans on the battlefield. If a single barrage could kill 8, then they only needed to fire the cannon several more times to eliminate half of them. Moreover, the key point was that the cannon blast just now had boosted group morale. The originally depressed ancient race martial artists began to burn with confidence once more. You were actually able to split the cannon blast into 9 beams and have each beam attack a different enemy. Lin Ming, you've done well. In our hands, we've simply disgraced this magic tool left behind by our ancestors. The several ancient race Empyreans that spoke had already tried using the Azura primal god cannon. They were well aware of how difficult it was to control the firing direction of the Azura primal god cannon. Hitting people with it was already difficult to begin with, let alone dividing the attack into 9. When they shot out a cannon blast, they wasted over 90% of the energy. However, Lin Ming was able to reasonably divide the energy of the Azura primal god cannon. The disparity was just too great. Lin Ming forced a smile. His face was paper white. In that cannon blast just now, although he hadn't used his own body's energy and had used the energy gathered from the Empyreans, he had still been the one controlling and directing the energies. And to direct the array formation along with that, this had drained Lin Ming. After all, he was only a peak holy lord and he had yet to consolidate his foundation. The Azura primal god cannon's array formation is too complex and there are highly profound Azura heavenly Tao rules contained within it. I found it extremely difficult to control and barely managed to divide the blast into 9, moreover, I failed to kill one of those people. If I was a bit more skilled in the Azura heavenly Tao, I would have been able to enliven each beam of light with its own spirituality so that they could actively target enemies. However, that wasn't what happened. I overdrew my soul force just then. I won't be able to guide a second cannon blast for some time. As Lin Ming spoke, the ancient race Empyreans also saw how exhausted he was. Smokeless quickly handed a soul recovery pill to Lin Ming. Of the pills that the celestial race elders refined without a care for the cost, she still had some remaining. And at this time, outside of the Ark of Hope, the Saint Empyreans had already begun to panic. How could that strike just now have strengthened by so much? Could they have been lulling us into a sense of false confidence so they could cut us down at a critical time? It shouldn't be. The first time they attacked we weren't on guard. If they were to use their strongest attack at that time, then the effects would have been much better. Saint Empyreans rapidly passed around sound transmissions, a growing horror evidence in their voices. Many middle and lower Saint Empyreans felt a shadow cast over their hearts. Without a doubt, if they had been aimed at instead of those 8 dead others, it would have been them turned to ashes. No matter how great the heavens or earth were, they placed their own lives at the greatest level of importance. After all, this wasn't some critical life or death battle for their race. The reason they had joined this war was for the inheritances and treasures of the Primeval Realm ruins and the many resources promised to them by the good fortune Saint Sovereign. However, if their lives were in danger or if there was a high chance of them perishing, it was inevitable that they would develop thoughts of fleeing. However, even though ordinary Empyreans were frightened, the many peak Empyreans didn't retreat. There were 12 of them together and they were the true commanders of the Primeval Universe War. Chapter 1903, The Power of the God Decrees. Chapter 1903, The Power of the God Decrees. The Saint Empyreans were naturally able to see how strange the spirit ship was. If they freely allowed it to escape and use great void shifts, then it would be even more difficult to chase after them, and because of this they would all be guilty of failing in their duties. On the other hand, if they could keep the ancient remnant races from escaping, they would be able to obtain generous rewards from the good fortune Saint Sovereign. These past years, they had been busy guarding the Primeval realm ruins. And the good fortune Saint Sovereign, as the most powerful true divinity amongst the saints, his resources, whether in quality or quantity, were enough to make others drool with envy. The 12 of us can join together. We just have to be a bit more careful. A Peak Empyrean sent out a sound transmission. The other Peak Empyreans nodded. That blast just now must have consumed a considerable amount of their strength. If that cannon light divided into 9, there must have been an extreme degree of control behind it. With the soul force needed for such control, they shouldn't be able to send out such a blast every time. A Peak Empyrean analyzed the situation. He wore red robes and his figure was tall and wide. Amongst the 12 Peak Empyreans, he held the greatest authority. Magic tools were taken out one after another, forming a wall of light blocking out space. They moved back, preparing to engage in a battle of attrition once more. They only wanted to delay the Ark of Hope and wait for the good fortune Saint Sovereign to catch up to the battlefield. As the supreme commander of the Saints' War, the good fortune Saint Sovereign didn't stay near the Chaos Star Ocean. The Peak Empyreans only needed to hold the battlefield until his arrival. These fellows. A Titan Empyrean gripped his fists. It was easy to see what the Saint Empyreans' plans were. They needed to flee from the Chaos Star Ocean that was blocked in by a spatial barrier and then cross through space using great void shifts. Then, they needed to fly to the nearest edge of the God-lamenting wall that bordered the divine realm, and break through that God-lamenting wall to enter. Whoosh! The red-robed Peak Empyrean took out a gourd. As he opened this gourd, billowing black smoke gushed out, covering the surrounding space. It's all heaven demon smoke. Some god race martial artists recognized this demonic item. This was a rarely seen type of spirit treasure. The spirit treasure was in the form of smoke, and once it touched a magic tool it could corrode it. Kai kai kai. The all-heaven demon smoke sunk through the protective shields of the Ark of Hope, slowly draining away its energy. This person is troublesome, the celestial patriarch thoughtfully said. This red-robed Empyrean faced the head of the ship and also faced the Azura primal god cannon. To do this meant that he had sufficient confidence in himself, otherwise he wouldn't dare to stand in such a position. The other 11 Peak Empyreans all spread out in other directions, encircling the Ark of Hope. Break out from the right side, that is where the protections are the weakest. Di Wuhen suddenly said. The right side was where the old man with the divine bell was standing, and he had already been injured by Lin Ming using the Azura primal god cannon. His divine bell had lost most of its spiritual power and it had also become deformed. It was clearly weakened tremendously. If they broke through on that side, the resistance they faced would be much less. But now, they couldn't yet use the Azura primal god cannon. Without Lin Ming using the Azura laws to guide the cannon, it would be almost impossible to aim the Azura primal god cannon in the right direction and hit a target. Let me. Looking at the Saint Empyrean holding the divine bell, a cold light appeared on Tobague's face. He slowly traced his spatial ring and took out a plain wooden box. Opening the wooden box, there was a yellow symbol paper inside. This was a god decree left behind by an ancient upper true divinity and was one of the treasures that the Celestials were willing to take out to repair the chain of calamity in order to receive 3 spots to enter the Azura Forbidden Zone. But because of Lin Ming, this precious god decree didn't need to be used, so it was saved. Not just that, but in the past month, this upper true divinity god decree had also been repaired by Lin Ming. It had recovered the damaged energies it had lost over 10 billion years, and now its power was incomparable to how it was just a month ago. Wuhan, Whitemark, go with the battle sovereign and assist him. The old god sovereign issued an order. Whitemark was one of the Peak Empyreans of the god race. It was only that he was considerably old and didn't have much time left remaining. In Di Wuhen and Whitemark's hands, they each grasped an upper true divinity god decree. These 3 upper true divinity god decrees were the trump cards of the ancient remnant races. Once they used them in battle, they would display a terrifying effect, enough to reverse the tide of a battle. Look for a chance and rush out of this encirclement. The old god sovereign felt that they couldn't be delayed for much longer. He was well aware in his heart that the good fortune Saint Sovereign would soon catch up to them, and that when he arrived, that would be the true final battle. You wretches, come and get it. Tobargue stepped onto the bow of the Ark of Hope, facing the Saint Empyreans in the vast starry space. Behind him stood Whitemark and Diwuhen. As the Saint Empyreans saw these people suddenly appear, they felt dread coil within them. But they didn't stop their barrage, instead only saving more strength to deal with any dangerous situations. Be careful, a Saint Empyrean reminded. But at this time, with a loud humming sound, a horrifying divine light began to bloom from around Tobargue, making him blaze like a sun. The common-looking ancient god decree in Tobargue's hand melted away into light. For a time, countless law runes spun around. These law runes fluctuated and changed, finally turning into the phantom of a primal god ancestor. This primal god ancestor held a long scythe in his hands as it rushed forwards like a god of death. Millimeter. The Saint Empyreans were horrified. As people with extraordinary vision, they could naturally see how terrifying this strike was. As the divine Bell Peak Empyrean saw this attack, his face drained of blood. This attack was specifically aimed at him. The two Peak Empyreans standing on either side of the divine Bell Old Man wanted to help him, but they were locked down by Diwuhen and Whitemark's killing intent. The two Peak Empyreans could see that Diwuhen and Whitemark were also holding onto yellow symbol papers. Moreover, Diwuhen and Whitemark were both individually strong to begin with. With their killing intent locked onto the two Peak Empyreans, the two Peak Empyreans were too busy thinking of protecting themselves. Neither of them was willing to risk their life to help rescue someone else. Now, the divine Bell Old Man had to face this god decree that was activated with all of Tobargue's strength. This was an upper true divinity god decree. Even though a glorious period of 10 billion years had passed, it still possessed an incredibly destructive power. Humph. Do you think I'm easy to bully just because I'm injured? As a Peak Empyrean, the divine Bell Old Man was arrogant to his bones. Even though he was injured and realized how frightening this strike was, he didn't think he would die like this. He formed seals with his hands even as he drew backwards. At the same time, he stimulated his protective astral essence to its limits. The divine bell in his hands also spun outwards, emitting a clear ringing sound. 9 suns illuminate the void. He roared. From the divine bell, 9 spheres of light formed by astral essence shot out, linking together in a line in the void. They were like 9 suns that came crashing down at the phantom of the death god. But at this time, the death god also slashed down its scythe. Who? With a nearly indiscernible sound, like a gust of wind blowing open doors, the death god phantom vanished. It had only appeared for an instant and made this single strike. This strike didn't seem grandiose at all. The death god had only slashed down his scythe, with barely the whisper of a sound following it. But this faint trace left behind by the strike remained in the skies. Silence spread, and the void seemed to be cut apart like thin paper, leaving behind a clear rift. As for that divine bell, it struck the tear in space with a ring and was immediately sliced in half. Seeing this, the divine bell old man was left dazed. From his left shoulder to his right rib, a straight line of blood appeared. And then, blood sprayed out. The old man's body shook and almost slipped apart. Guru Gold Bell. The Saint Empyreans were dumbfounded. From behind the divine bell old man, several Peak Empyreans stepped towards him like bolts of lightning. As they reached him, they discovered that the divine bell old man's situation was extremely bad. He was dead soon. Empyreans of the saint race all had extremely formidable mortal bodies. Even after suffering a serious physical wound, they wouldn't die. But in that strike just now, the death god's energy had pierced through the old man's flesh and blood, directly extinguishing his life force. This was an irreversible loss that could not be recovered from. In other words, this divine bell old man was done for. A Peak Empyrean had been heavily wounded with one strike and would die in the next moment. And in frontal combat and in a situation where the divine bell old man wasn't injured, his combat strength wouldn't be much worse than Tobargue's. What terrifying power! Tobague gasped, amazed. As one of the leaders of the Celestials, he definitely knew how powerful the God decree in his hand had been. He also knew that after being repaired by Lin Ming, its strength should have risen even more. But he didn't think it would rise to such a degree. Ever since the war began, this was the first time a peak Empyrean had died. Generally speaking, when one reached the level of a peak Empyrean, they could freely wander through the universe with a wide smile, with almost nothing being capable of threatening them. But in this battle, a peak Empyrean had died. Break through. The old god sovereign firmly acted and sent out an order. The Ark of Hope changed directions, hurtling towards the nearly dead divine Bell Old Man. And on the bow of the Ark of Hope, Di Wuhen and Whitemark tightly grasped the two other upper true divinity god decrees, glaring at the other Saint Empyreans. With the threat of the god decrees present, the two peak Empyreans near the divine Bell Old Man felt their breath catch in their throats. Neither of them dared to stop the spirit ship. The miserable fate of the divine Bell Old Man was openly displayed in front of them, and they didn't think they were much stronger than he was. Once they were targeted by those terrifying god decrees, even if they didn't die, they would suffer heavy wounds and either directly drop in cultivation boundaries or lose a tremendous portion of their lifespan. As for the other 9 peak Empyreans, they were hundreds of thousands of miles away. They couldn't immediately help. Bang! With a thunderous rumble, the Ark of Hope used its dreadful speed and strength to break past the spatial barrier set down by the Saint Empyreans and then rushed deep into the starry cosmos. The Ark of Hope's speed was astonishingly fast. With dozens of ancient race Empyreans joining forces to drive it, once the spirit ship broke past the blockade, it would be difficult for Empyrean powerhouses to overtake them. Have we made it? An ancient race Empyrean held his breath. Did they really escape successfully? Just as this thought passed through the minds of everyone, at this time, the old god sovereign shook. The old god sovereign looked deep into the void of space. Within his old eyes, fear began to rise. Heavens, what is that? Chapter 1904, Good Fortune Saint Sovereign. Chapter 1904, Good Fortune Saint Sovereign. At the words of the old god sovereign, the ancient race martial artists all began looking out the porthole. Through the deep porthole, amongst the endless ocean of stars that was the universe, they could see a dim blood-red light. Then, they could clearly see a massive crimson sphere, one that was 70,000 to 80,000 miles in diameter. On the upper part of the crimson sphere, dozens of blood dragons recklessly roared out. Only half the bodies of these blood dragons appeared. They seemed to have been bred from within the crimson sphere, making them look like tentacles. The blood dragons roared, revealing red fangs. As the ancient race martial artists saw this titanic and horrifying beast appear, they were all struck dumb. It didn't seem like any vicious beast or god beast they knew of, and the aura it emitted was over 100 times more terrifying than a god beast. Facing this horrifying monster, the ancient race Empyreans felt their hearts quiver. The crimson monster was incredibly fast. It was originally far off in the distant space, but in just several breaths of time it flew close, like a blood-red ghost. Deep red filled the universe. This feeling was like a drop of blood falling into clear water, slowly spreading out until it covered everyone's eyes. This is. Even Tobague, the war-hardened battle sovereign that never chose to give up, began to feel fear. On the side of the primal god race, the old god sovereign sucked in a breath of cold air. His wizened features had turned completely pale. As he looked out the porthole, he was unable to say anything. His heart began to slowly sink. He was able to guess just what the origin of this monster was. Billions of years ago, the ancient races had also fought with the saints. In the texts of the ancient races there were records about this dreadful monster. But according to the information written down in these ancient texts, this monster should have had its soul erased billions of years ago and plunged into a state of eternal slumber. Why would it reappear here? Recalling the terrifying description of this monster from the ancient primal god race texts, the old god sovereign felt as if he were drowning in despair. Could this really be our destiny? Do the heavens really wish to annihilate my god race? The old god sovereign whispered. His words were heard by many ancient race Empyreans. They all looked at him with shock. Your Majesty, What is that? At this time, not too far from the old god sovereign, the celestial patriarch spoke up. His voice trembled, making him seem far, far older in this moment. That is likely. Famine, the totem holy beast of the saint race, billions of years ago, famine rampaged through the universes, devouring countless lives, including even many true divinities. What? Devouring true divinities? The ancient race martial artists all shook. In the current 33 heavens, only 2 races possessed true divinities, the saints and the spiriters. Even so, the number of true divinities they had was extremely small. Among them were those who deliberately retired to their homelands and didn't wish to participate in the disputes of the world, as well as those mysterious true divinities who people weren't even sure were still alive. I never would have imagined that famine would still exist. An old man from the roaring bone race deeply sighed as he shook his head. Many of the Empyreans present hadn't read the ancient texts, and there weren't many records of famine to begin with. With our current strength, if we wish to overcome this great calamity, we must slay the good fortune Saint Sovereign. That was already a nigh impossible mission to begin with, but now even famine has appeared. The roaring bone old man looked away from the porthole. He shakily slumped into a chair, listless. He was the patriarch of the roaring bone race and one of the leaders of the ancient remnant races. According to custom, he shouldn't have said anything that would lower the morale of the troops. But the gloom in his heart was simply too great. The appearance of famine caused him to feel as if the world was collapsing. Famine, is it even stronger than the good fortune Saint Sovereign? Someone asked. The one who spoke up was Lin Ming. He had taken the soul recovery pill and was sitting in meditation. He had also seen the terrifying monster outside the porthole. Yes, according to the ancient texts, it is likely stronger than the good fortune Saint Sovereign, and it is absolutely more horrifying than the good fortune Saint Sovereign. It can swallow, swallowing 1 trillion lives, swallowing even a world. The more it swallows, the more powerful it becomes. The speed at which it can destroy a world is 100 times faster than the good fortune Saint Sovereign. I understand. Lin Ming's eyes darkened. Facing this new catastrophe, even he began to feel lost. Humanity had to face the saints, which were far, far stronger than them, and they also had to face the mysterious spiriters, whose goals were yet unknown. The situation of humanity was becoming increasingly complex. He recalled the strange conversation he had with Soul Empress Sheng Mai, and he also recalled his meeting with the old youth, someone who he didn't even know was a friend or foe. With the arrival of the great calamity, all forces were surging upwards, everything becoming confusing. As nothing but a little peak holy lord martial artist, no matter how many more lucky chances he had or how powerful his laws were, in the end, without a formidable cultivation base he would be nothing but a tiny gust of wind in this great calamity. Just what could he do? Lin Ming felt a sense of morbid exhaustion creep over his heart. In his ears, Sheng Mai's words unconsciously echoed, "Give up and leave this storm, because all of your efforts will be for nothing." Don't you know the story of Empyrean divine seal from 3-6 billion years ago? He was a truly peerless character, a true dragon of the world, but he also chose to shoulder the destiny of humanity, and in the end he died in battle. What a pity, what a loss. Lin Ming closed his eyes. He clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles emitted loud cracking noises. "Look at that monster's back," an ancient race Empyrean said. Everyone looked over. They could see that the crimson monster was carrying 2 people on its back. One was a tall and middle-aged man wearing a gold cloak. The other was a handsome young man with sharp eyebrows and gloomy eyes. Seeing these 2 people, the old god sovereign's complexion changed. That man is the good fortune Saint Sovereign. His body, how could it? Has he become one with famine? The old god sovereign muttered with disbelief thick in his voice. The good fortune Saint Sovereign's legs had sunk into famine's body. Moreover, he could see that the flesh and blood of famine was spreading into the good fortune Saint Sovereign, their blood vessels linked together. As if famine was swallowing the good fortune Saint Sovereign. However, logic told him this was impossible. Perhaps it was the opposite. The good fortune Saint Sovereign had swallowed famine, or perhaps famine had even become the good fortune Saint Sovereign's avatar. So he is the good fortune Saint Sovereign. Lin Ming looked at the man wearing the golden cloak. This was the first time he had laid eyes upon the good fortune Saint Sovereign. He could feel this other person's eyes pierce through the vastness of space and gaze upon him. This was a bizarre feeling. They were separated by a great distance of space as well as the Ark of Hope's protective shields, so it should have been impossible for him to be seen. But for some reason, Lin Ming felt as if the good fortune Saint Sovereign was looking at him, as if there were no barriers between the two. And standing beside the good fortune Saint Sovereign was someone Lin Ming was long since acquainted with, the good fortune Saint Sun. At this time, the good fortune Saint Sun had a wild grin on his face. This was the smile of a victor, carrying with it a hint of pity, a hint of ridicule. And then, beyond Lin Ming's imagination, the good fortune Saint Sun began to speak. His voice spread through millions of miles of space using energy as a medium. Lin Ming, I know you are on board that spirit ship. Today is the day you die, ha 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 ha. The day of our 100-year duel has yet to truly arrive, right? Unfortunately, you won't have such a chance. Today you will be killed. The good fortune Saint Sun raved. Lin Ming's heart skipped a beat. The good fortune Saint Sovereign knew he was with the primal god race. But why would the good fortune Saint Sovereign know his whereabouts? Lin Ming had carefully disguised and hidden himself away and was positive he hadn't been discovered by the saints. If his whereabouts were revealed in this sort of situation, then it was either because there was a spy amongst the god race, or Sheng Mai had informed the good fortune Saint Sovereign of his location. The chances of it being a spy weren't too great. This was because the ancient races didn't know of Lin Ming's past history with the saints. Moreover, after the escape plan was finalized, all information was limited to the high-level figures of the ancient races in order to prevent anything from being leaked out. Then, could it be Sheng Mai? Lin Ming faintly frowned. Although he and Sheng Mai were no longer friends, and might even be enemies, he still didn't believe that Sheng Mai would betray him like this. Perhaps, when he left the Soul World and entered the Primeval universe, his location might have been locked down by the Soul Emperor. For the Soul Emperor, this wouldn't be difficult. The Soul Emperor, does he want to sentence me to death? But as these thoughts flashed through Lin Ming's mind, in the starry skies, that massive crimson sphere suddenly distorted. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Atop the blood sphere, dozens of fierce red dragons roared and came rushing forward. These blood dragons possessed an overwhelming killing intent. They tore through the void, manically racing forward. And their target was the Ark of Hope. This is bad. The Empyreans managing the Ark of Hope's array formation began to panic. They did everything they could to control the array formation and change the direction of the Ark of Hope. But with their abilities, how could they compare with famine? Bang! A loud explosion rang out. Dozens of fierce dragon tentacles smashed into the Ark of Hope's protective shield. The Ark of Hope violently shook, nearly spinning around. The Empyreans within were able to use energy to stabilize their bodies, but the common ancient race citizens were far worse off. They cried out in alarm, some of them even injured in the fierce impact. Damn it! Tobague was incensed. They were originally about to escape into the heavens and break through the god-lamenting wall, but at this critical moment they had encountered such a disaster. All of their plans were toppling over. That strike just now consumed 2% of the hull's energy, a roaring bone race Empyrean reported. Famine's attack had used up 2% of the ship's energy. This was the same as a single blast from the Azura primal god cannon. If this continued, they wouldn't be able to last too many strikes before the Ark of Hope's energy was used up. Ha. Lin Ming, aren't you strong? What? You don't have the strength to fight back. The good fortune Saint Sun's voice reverberated in space, insolent beyond compare. Chapter 1905, Azura Decree. Chapter 1905, Azura Decree. Bang, bang, bang. The dreadful crimson monster far off in the vast starry space formed numerous blood-red dragons that smashed into the Ark of Hope's protective shield. The Empyreans directing the spirit ship were completely unable to control its movements. For a time, the entire spirit ship began to violently rock like a small leaf caught in a storm. Energy reserves have been reduced to below 90%. An Empyrean shouted. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the Ark of Hope's energy reserves were completely depleted. At that time, they would all die. The time has come. We can only use our final trump cards. The Celestial Patriarch said. He looked towards the old god sovereign and sighed. The so-called final cards were in truth the god decrees left behind by the Azura Roadmaster. These were god decrees personally drawn by the Azura Roadmaster. There was a total of 3. 1 offensive, 1 sealing, 1 support. As beyond divinity level treasures, if a peak Empyrean were to activate these god decrees, they would have to burn away most of their life as the cost in order to potentially kill a true divinity. Of course, the good fortune Saint Sovereign was not an ordinary true divinity. To kill the good sovereign Saint Sovereign might be impossible, but they should still be able to at least heavily wound him. And if they combined the other 2 Azura decrees and the rest of their god decrees, they might really be able to exterminate the good fortune Saint Sovereign. However, currently, the good fortune Saint Sovereign had somehow fused together with the body of Famine. The abyssal demon, Famine. An inconceivable existence with an incomparably terrifying life force. If they only burned part of their lives to activate the god decrees left behind by the Azura Roadmaster, would they even be able to severely wound it? Everyone's hearts grew heavy with doubt. If they couldn't severely wound Famine, how could they hope to escape? The old god sovereign silently traced his spatial ring. He slowly said, I never imagined that as we stood on the precipice of life or death, the good fortune Saint Sovereign would show up even more formidable than before. I originally thought that with our god decrees and the peak Empyreans of my race burning their life to activate them, they could at least pose a threat to the good fortune Saint Sovereign. But now it seems that merely burning a part of their life won't be enough. In fact, even a peak Empyrean alone will be insufficient. Everyone, who is willing to step up? The old god sovereign never thought that things would turn out like this. Only peak Empyreans could activate the Azura decrees. And in this situation, in order to display the greatest might of the Azura decrees and damage Famine as much as they could, those activating the god decrees would have to completely burn away every last vestige of their life. In other words, that was to sacrifice themselves. Moreover, a single person wasn't enough. With all the Empyreans of the ancient races added together, there were a total of 7 peak Empyreans. This was a relatively high number. 7 peak Empyreans. 3 god decrees. The old god sovereign planned to have 2 peak Empyreans activate the first god decree together. 2 was the best number. The second Empyrean would only be able to increase the might of the Azura decree by less than half, and a third Empyrean would add even less than that. Originally, activating the Azura decrees didn't mean death, thus the old god sovereign was willing to appoint others to use them. But now, using them meant certain death. So the old god sovereign didn't force anyone, but instead asked those present. The old god sovereign's elderly eyes swept over the peak Empyreans present. Guilt showed heavily on his face. He also desired to go to battle, but he couldn't die now. During this escape, they needed a leader to command the troops, and he was the backbone of the ancient races. I am willing to go to battle. An old primal god Empyrean said. He was a peak Empyrean and had already lived for 80 to 90 million years. He was reaching the twilight of his years and didn't have much time left remaining. I also want to go. Allow me. I volunteer. Peak Empyreans stood up one after another. This great calamity involved the life or death of their people. These ancient race Empyreans had long since hardened their resolves and were willing to die. Seeing so many Empyreans stand up, the old god sovereign's wizened eyes filled with tears. Now, he had to choose. Those he chose would be those that died. Lin Ming stood not too far away, silently watching all of this occur. Besides the old god sovereign, the other 6 peak Empyreans didn't avoid their duties at all. And Lin Ming knew that if the old god sovereign needed to sacrifice his life, he wouldn't have even blinked in doing so. This scene left Lin Ming shocked. A feeling that had long been absent from his heart began to quietly linger within him. He clenched his fists. Some people fought in order to kill others and steal their possessions. Some people fought to take revenge and cut down their enemies. Some people fought to obtain lucky chances and treasures. But, There were also those who fought and were even willing to sacrifice themselves, all for the sake of others, for the sake of the greater good and the continuation of their people. Wuhan, battle sovereign, the two of you draw back. The old god sovereign waved his hand. The battle sovereign and Di Wuhen were both Empyreans in the peak of their prime. They were the hopes and future leaders of the ancient races in this great calamity, and it was impossible for the old god sovereign to sacrifice them. But, Your Majesty, Di Wuhen and Tobago's eyes turned red and misty, but the old god sovereign had directly dismissed them. White Mark, Dugu, I am sorry. The old god sovereign chose two people, both of them peak Empyreans of the primal god race. The old god sovereign silently closed his eyes, 2 lines of tears running down his wrinkled face. Understood. Great. The 2 old Empyreans stepped forwards. As Lin Ming saw their white hair and bent backs, he didn't know what to feel. The other ancient race martial artists looked at them and were unable to restrain the sorrow in their hearts. If you have any words you wish to say, the old god sovereign asked. White Mark was silent. He took out a scroll painting from his spatial ring and a jade pendant. He silently unrolled the scroll. The paper of this drawing was extremely ancient, as if it had been stored away for an illustrious span of time. The painting on the scroll was of a childish and innocent youth. The youth had a jade pendant hanging from his waist, the exact same as the one White Mark was holding. This is my grandchild. His natural talent couldn't be considered too great, but he was diligent in his youth and always gave his best efforts. During his youth, he stubbornly left to go adventuring, and he entered the Primeval Realm ruins to temper himself in the dangers of the mystic realms there. But after that, he didn't return. The old man's voice was aged and hoarse. This was his only grandchild. The primal god race was a race that wasn't accepted by the heavenly Tao. They could not compare to the 3 peak races because their reproductive capabilities were extremely poor. They had few descendants, and even then the descendants of Empyreans weren't necessarily peerless geniuses. The reasons that the humans and saints were able to find talents amongst their ranks was because of their thriving populations. Their innumerable descendants were screened through layer upon layer of tests until the best were remaining. If you can find him, please take care of him for me. In my life, he is my only remaining worry. The old man passed the 2 items to Di Wuhen. Di Wuhen didn't know what to feel. He parted his lips as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. He eventually sighed. He knew that the chances of finding this young man were nearly non-existent. In all likelihood, he had already perished. However, in the primal god race that had low numbers to begin with, they valued their descendants above all and couldn't bear the thought of losing them or even giving up on them. In particular, now that White Mark was soon about to die, in his heart he hoped that this own bloodline could continue onwards. Dugu, and you. The old god sovereign looked at the other Empyrean, his eyes wet. Dugu looked back indifferently, slowly shaking his head. Compared to White Mark, Dugu had grown up in the wilderness since his youth, living by drinking the blood of birds and beasts. His disposition was more detached. Once, he had ventured into the Primeval Realm ruins as an assassin. His hands were stained with the blood of saint martial artists. I have nothing much to say. I have no descendants, only myself. Dugu's eyes were neither sad nor happy. Instead, they contained a calm tranquility and an iron-hard resoluteness. He had once been young, and he had also deeply loved someone. However, in his long life, the woman he loved was not able to give birth to a child. The reproductive capabilities of the primal god race were far too low. It was as if the heavenly Tao had placed a curse upon them. He had arrived alone in this world and now he would die alone. Perhaps this was his fate for being an assassin, but presently, he was no longer an assassin. The spirit ship's atmosphere was tense and heavy. Worry, fear, anger, and even sorrow towards the future. Every person's eyes flashed with light, their minds filled with thoughts. Everyone watched as Dugu and White Mark left. The 2 of them stepped onto the bow of the ship. The good fortune Saint Sun looked at these 2 old men on the bow of the ship and diabolically grinned. 2 fools seeking death. Beside the good fortune Saint Sun, the good fortune Saint Sovereign's attention was raptly focused on the 2 old men. The two of them were peak Empyreans in the waning years of their lives. This was not enough for the good fortune Saint Sovereign to feel fear for, but the black symbol paper in their hands was actually startling. That is, a god decree? Good. Then let me see just what this ultimate power is like. The pure black god decree carried with it an endless slaughter aura. Beneath Whitemark's control, it slowly floated upwards. Whitemark calmly looked at the god decree floating before him. Then, with a resonant shout, a brilliant blood-red light lit up his eyes. Winds rose up around his body. His hair fluttered upwards and his robes flapped about. In this moment, he emitted a blinding light. Vast waves of life force gushed out of him like raging rivers, endlessly surging into the middle of the god decree. And in the next moment, all of his blood boiled over to the surface, rushing towards the god decree. The old Empyrean's body was soaked in a dazzling divine light. Then, divine light also lit up around Dugu. His face was still cold and indifferent, but now it contained a deep unyielding and unwilling gaze. His life had reached its terminus and this would not change. But, he didn't want the future generations of the primal god race to share his fate. If the heavens must destroy my god race, then with my god blood, let me turn into demonic flames that burn down the skies. Dugu's blood began to burn. This was the final brilliance released from combusting his very life. In that instant, the god decree seemed to come alive. Fluctuations emanated from within it. Although this was only simple fluctuations, it was like a divine weapon that had lain dormant for 1 trillion years was stirring, releasing a terrifying aura. A massive black Azura phantom began to slowly appear. Chapter 1906, Blood Dyes the Starry Skies. Chapter 1906, Blood Dyes the Starry Skies. With the appearance of the pitch-black Azura warrior standing atop the spirit ship, Lin Ming could feel his heart begin to race. The Azura blood within his body trembled and the black dragon spear fused into his body also began to emit a keening cry. These forces that were incorporated into Lin Ming's body began to resonate with the God Decree's Azura phantom. Azura Roadmaster, light passed over Lin Ming's eyes. Compared to the previous true divinity level God Decrees that had burned away, this aura was abnormally sharp. As the Azura warrior phantom's image became increasingly clear, the smell of blood and iron also spread outwards, as if the entire surrounding space had turned into a merciless killing field. A boundless vorpal light shot out from his pupils, casting out through the universe. The God Decree rose up in strength once more. Like a sun, it emitted endless rays of light. The Azura warrior was covered by this light. A black long spear formed in his hands and he rushed out from the spirit ship, hurtling into the distance. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Outside the snow-white spirit ship, waves of attacks struck like a tide, emitting horrifying sounds like the beating of a great drum that caused the heart to race. The Azura Roadmaster's God Decree? You want to use this to resist me? Lin Ming, as well as those old bags of bones from the ancient races, today you will all become food for famine. The good fortune Saint Sovereign ruthlessly sneered, his complexion cold. In his eyes, the primal god race were nothing but a sun finally setting beneath the mountains. Although they still had some qualifications left, against the rising saints and their irresistible momentum, they were nothing but dogs and chickens. Now, on this day, he wanted this once incomparably glorious race to vanish in the endless flow of time. Thinking this, a blood-red light lit up his eyes. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The dozens of fierce blood dragons were like infinitely long whips. They all completely halted their attacks and immediately retracted, surrounding the vast crimson sphere. At the same time, a dragon tentacle fell down onto a giant saint race warship, allowing the good fortune Saint Sun to drop down. In a moment, those fierce dragons turned into layers of flesh and blood shields, forming countless walls, surrounding the massive planet-sized ball of flesh. After being locked onto by the Azura Decree, dodging was unrealistic. Moreover, with Famine's body being so large, dodging would be impossible to begin with. The Azura warrior trod through space, a massive black dragon spear grasped in his hand. Endless rays of black light radiated from him. Each ray of light covered tens of thousands of miles of space. Some saint race spirit ships that were too close were swept up in the light. Then, like kites caught in an explosion, all of them burst apart into black fireballs. From within the spirit ships, countless pained howls echoed out. The Azura warrior became one with his spear. Boundless potent might gushed out from him, rippling out in all directions. The surrounding void began to shake like a tossing sea. Space cracked without end, and even nearby celestial bodies began collapsing. Many saint race spirit ships rapidly retreated. Some of those that were fast enough were able to escape the blinding light, but those that didn't withdraw in time were disintegrated. The Azura warrior and the long spear in his hands seemed to transform into an endless column of black light that hurtled into the center of that giant blood-red ball. Pitch black light and blood-red light covered the endless starry space, making it impossible to clearly see what was happening. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Waves of heaven-shaking detonations occurred. Many pieces of meat scattered outwards and burned away. The void was pierced through all around, causing massive space storms to sweep out. In the shockwaves of that terrifying attack, even the universe seemed to crack open. Seeing this occur, the eyes of the primal god race powerhouses in the white spirit ship began to light up with hope. As for those in the saint race spirit ships, all of them fell quiet, the atmosphere solemn and earnest. The battle outside had only lasted for a single strike. But the vast momentum and heaven-collapsing energy made it impossible for anyone to approach. In fact, they likely couldn't even withstand the fallout. This is a god decree left behind by God Sovereign Azura. Our sovereign, there shouldn't be a problem, right? Someone murmured. In that dreadful impact, the Azura warrior and his black spear began to slowly fade away. All that was left over was limitless black lights that continued to burn and emit thunderous rumbling sounds. And at this time, in the center of the explosions at a place surrounded by endless black light, a fierce blood dragon suddenly shot out. Then, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fierce dragon after fierce dragon drilled out, tearing open the void that was distorted by the black light. Famine's giant bloated body forcefully ripped open the void and pushed out from the horrifying space storms. It's alive. Seeing Famine appear, the old god sovereign blanched. Although he had planned for the worst situation to occur, as he really saw this happen he almost suffocated. Whoosh! A mountain-thick whip of meat penetrated the void and smashed against the Ark of Hope. This powerful blow was enough to crush a planet. The spirit ship hummed as trillions of runes flashed and dissipated. Damn it all. The Ark of Hope shakily flew away. At this time, more and more blood-red dragons thrust out, thoroughly scattering the black light that covered Famine. With this, everyone saw Famine, which had been injured by the Azura decree. Within that titanic ball of blood meat, there was a massive fissure that was thousands of miles deep. A great deal of Famine's flesh had turned into bloody water that spread out. A number of fierce dragons had been cut off and they wriggled on the surface of Famine like worms. Then, these cut-off worms melted away, fusing back into Famine. Famine could swallow all, and it could even swallow its severed limbs to reabsorb them. The good fortune Saint Sovereign stoop atop this massive ball of meat, his expression murderous. Blood vessels had torn open and exploded all over his body, causing him to be drenched in blood and seem like a demon. The Azura decree's strongest blow had been aimed towards him. If it weren't for Famine blocking the strike for him, then he would have been grievously wounded, and there was even a chance he might have died. Azura Roadmaster, you are really fierce. Just a wisp of your remnant aura is able to injure me like this. But so what? You are already dead, and now I will make sure all your descendants become extinct. The good fortune Saint Sovereign had not tasted such pain in 100 million years. With overweening arrogance, raging anger kindled within him. Seeing this, those within the Ark of Hope were frightened. Inside the spirit ship, there was nothing but silence. Not even that could kill him. Someone cried out in fear, their eyes clouding over with despair. Tobago's complexion was somber, he was already at a loss for words. 2 peak god race Empyreans had been sacrificed and an Azura decree had been used, and the only result they managed to get in return was a wound on the good fortune Saint Sovereign. This caused a heavy pall to fall on everyone's mind. Without a doubt, This showed that after the good fortune Saint Sovereign fused with that abyssal, his strength had increased astronomically. His vitality now far exceeded that of an ordinary true divinity, and not even an Azura decree could kill him. For you lot to accomplish this is indeed surprising. But don't think you will have a second chance to injure me. As the good fortune Saint Sovereign towered above the massive ball of flesh, his eyes glowed with a cold light. Space rumbled like an endlessly rolling thundercloud. The sound seemed to link straight into the hearts of everyone, daunting them with a horrifying pressure. On Famine's body, where the fierce dragons had been cut off, the flesh began to wriggle about. With a gurgling sound, a new fierce dragon thrust out. The good fortune Saint Sovereign thrust out a hand and pointed towards the white spirit ship. Rays of blood-red light shot out like bolts of crimson lightning. They formed layers of red enchantments that surrounded the white spirit ship. Each red enchantment was like an invisible great hand, squeezing down with incredible power. The white spirit ship's defensive shield emitted cracking sounds. More and more energy rapidly dissipated. The ship has less than 85% energy remaining. We won't be able to hold much longer. A primal god race Empyrean managing the spirit ship loudly shouted with a shaky voice towards the old god sovereign. An anxious and strained atmosphere covered the entire ship, along with the increasingly loud squeezing sounds from outside. Each cracking sound seemed to be squeezing down on the hearts of the ancient race martial artists. Outside, the saint race spirit ships gathered together. Their war cries blasted out like thunder, reverberating through the cosmos. What could they do? Some people clenched their fists. Anger lit up in their eyes along with unwillingness. Some people closed their eyes in pain. They were once the strongest race with a legacy that continued through the endless years. But now, they had been reduced to this. More people looked outside, their eyes boiling over with radiance. At this time, Battle Sovereign Tabague stepped forwards. He shouted out, "Even if we must die, we will die with glory and honor. Your Majesty God Sovereign, please give the order to send out my celestial race. I am willing to lead the numerous martial artists of my people to serve as the vanguard." The ancient races were all proud and arrogant people. Their races had once experienced infinite grandeur. In the midst of blood and iron, that was where their lives should bloom with the greatest light. How could they submit themselves to dying cowardly deaths? The voices of those desiring to fight suddenly rose up like a rising tide. Empyreans began stepping forwards one after another. In particular, those Empyreans in the prime of their lives were extremely excited, all of them wishing to go out and slaughter as much as they could. When those two elderly Empyreans had sacrificed themselves, they had done so in order to preserve these robust young Empyreans and have them revive the ancient races in the future. Everyone calm down. The old god sovereign angrily scolded. For a time, everyone fell quiet. We have not yet reached a dead end. We still have 2 Azura decrees. The old god sovereign lifted his hand. Above his hand, 2 black god decrees still floated, bathed in a divine light. As the god race Empyreans saw these 2 god decrees, their eyes filled with a complex color. In order to activate an Azura decree, it required peak Empyreans to combust their life. This was a tremendous price. And even then, they had only been able to wound the good fortune Saint Sovereign and weren't able to kill him. Although they had 2 remaining, was there still a use for them? Seeing the skepticism of the Empyreans, the old god sovereign said, "We won't sit idly by, but we won't die in vain either. These 2 Azura decrees are different." Chapter 1907, The Changes of Time. Chapter 1907, The Changes of Time. There are 2 God decrees, one with the word seal and the other with the word faith. The word of seal is a great sealing technique, capable of binding the soul and destroying a spirit mark. But the word of faith is a supportive technique. It can have a martial artist dig out the greatest potential of their life for a short period of time, obtaining a strength 10 times greater than what they have. However, the target of the word of faith should be a true divinity. Only a true divinity can withstand such a potent power. For a peak Empyrean, Their body and foundation is more vulnerable, and if they were forced to withstand the power of the word of faith, then their body might collapse from the influx of strength. Even if they could withstand it, they wouldn't be able to fight for long. It would be the same as burning away their life for battle. As the old god sovereign spoke, Di Wuhen stepped forth. "Honorable master, allow me to withstand it. I will do it. The losses to the god race are not small, and when it comes to the mortal body, my celestial race is slightly more formidable than the god race." Tobague said. If an old Empyrean were to have an Azura decree used on them, then their body would simply disintegrate on the spot. Only a peak Empyrean in the prime of their life would be able to show the potential of the word of faith. However, the old god sovereign shook his head. "You too cannot withstand it." "What, this?" Di Wuhen was worried. He and Tobague were the two individuals that had the greatest vitality within the ancient remnant races. The ancient races were races that were able to triple cultivate essence, energy, and divine. Tobague and Di Wuhen had both cultivated body transformation before. If they couldn't withstand it, then who could? The old god sovereign took a deep breath as if he were coming to a decision. "Lin Ming, come with me." The old god sovereign's words were lonely and desolate. Lin Ming was startled. Faintly, he seemed to realize something. The surrounding Empyreans were confused about what was occurring. They didn't know what the old god sovereign was calling Lin Ming for. Although Lin Ming had amazing attainments in the laws, in terms of overall combat strength he was beneath the Empyreans present. "Senior god sovereign, you." Lin Ming hesitated. But the old god sovereign only continued forwards, not turning around. The old god sovereign whispered, "I never thought that his words would finally come true. In the end, that there would be such a day. In the end, he cannot escape the past." As the old god sovereign spoke, they finally arrived in front of a plain and heavy stone door. This stone door was pure black and was carved with mysterious patterns. Lin Ming had seen this stone door once before. He always felt that it was similar to a tombstone. When the God Race headquarters was evacuated into the Ark of Hope, this secret chamber was also moved in. This stone door was the entrance to the chamber. Lin Ming was silent. He watched on as the old god sovereign pushed open the stone door. Behind it he could feel a fierce and brutal, demonic aura. This demonic aura surged into the vast space, incomparably suppressing. A deep and bass roar howled out like the screams of a wild animal, filled with endless fury and murderous intent, flooding the chamber and echoing without end. Empyrean Primordius. Lin Ming listened to the roars in this chamber and his mind filled with inexplicable memories. In the deep dark he saw the two blood-red pupils. They were familiar, enough to make his heart quicken. This ferocious great beast seemed to crawl up from an abyss. Horns jutted out from its head and its grand body was tied down with layers and layers of chains. Its blood-red pupils were full of madness and slaughter. It heavily panted, its horrifying eyes tightly fixated on Lin Ming. Inside these eyes were nothing but bloodthirsty desires. Empyrean Primordius had once possessed the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. Using it, he opened the 9 stars of the Tao Palace and reached large success in body transformation. He was an extreme talent. If it weren't for the saints trying to kill him off ahead of time, then Empyrean Primordius might have been able to complete his Grand Mist Samsara Tao and become another Azura Roadmaster. Afterwards, although Empyrean Primordius had been grievously wounded and he lost the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, he still managed to seize the body of an abyssal. This abyssal demon's body was even stronger than a god beast. The current Empyrean Primordius was a peak Empyrean who had opened the 9 stars of the Tao Palace and had fused with an abyssal. Because he had lost his rationality, his combat strength was greatly diminished. Even so, in terms of just the mortal body, he had reached the peak. If he were supported with the Azura decree and all the potential of his life were dug out, then he would become unbelievably powerful. Just how much potential did the current Empyrean Primordius possess? Lin Ming found this hard to imagine. God Sovereign, do you plan to have Senior Primordius go to battle? Lin Ming sighed inwardly, not knowing what he felt. A hero who had reached his end, who had lost his road, Even so, he still desired to rush onto the battlefield, even if this meant dying in foreign land. The old god sovereign silently nodded. Lin Ming remembered the words Empyrean Primordius had carved into the stone of the chamber. I have become a demon, and I fear death no more. But once I die in this strange land, will my ashes return to my homeland? Time to time clarity returns to me, time to time I am lost in chaos. I know that one day I will devolve into a base beast. On that day, do not kill me, and do not seal me away forever. Wait until the great army of the saints arrives and let my demon body enter the camp of the saints, drinking thirstily of their blood, devouring my fill of their flesh. Let me die heroically in battle. Recalling Empyrean Primordius words and the current Empyrean who howled and who had lost all the brightness in his eyes, Lin Ming felt a deep and abiding sadness. The old god sovereign gently patted Lin Ming's shoulder. Do not feel guilty. To die on the battlefield is the greatest desire that Empyrean Primordius repeated to me before he devolved into a mindless demon. Even with these words, Lin Ming found this hard to accept. Although this was Primordius' wish, to have him rush out and sacrifice himself in a state where he had no rational thoughts, Lin Ming found this difficult to understand. Lin Ming hoped that at least in the end, when Primordius' life was at its twilight, he could decide for himself and see why he was fighting. Senior God Sovereign, can this junior try to awaken just a tiny sliver of Empyrean Primordius awareness? If Lin Ming could try awakening Primordius consciousness, even just a little, then he would be able to realize the laws. And with being able to understand combat tactics, his battle efficiency would rise dramatically. Can you? The old God Sovereign was shocked. Lin Ming even had such an ability. This involved the most mysterious soul domain of the body. Moreover, this was a most troublesome case of soul fusion and disassociation of personality. Even a Spiritus Supreme Elder that was skilled in the soul arts would be left powerless and frustrated. If I can ignore all potential damages to his spiritual sea, then perhaps I can try. Senior God Sovereign, could you calm down Senior Primordius as much as you can? Lin Ming had once wanted to probe Empyrean Primordius' spiritual sea, but he was almost killed by the berserk Empyrean Primordius. The old god sovereign nodded. An energy that seemed to accept all formed a sea of energy that slowly soaked Empyrean Primordius' body. Lin Ming's complexion was earnest. He took a step towards this horrifying abyssal. Roar. Just as Lin Ming approached a little, Empyrean Primordius howled and slashed out his claws. The great shaking strength passed through the air, aimed at Lin Ming, but in that moment, a warm and vast energy surged out from behind Lin Ming, counterbalancing the killing power of Empyrean Primordius. The old god sovereign was completely focused. He didn't dare to use too much strength for fear of enraging Primordius. Once Primordius went crazy, even the old god sovereign wouldn't be able to stop him. Primordius was a terrifying killing machine. Seeing this, Lin Ming's heart settled a little. He floated up and forwards until he was just 3 feet away from Empyrean Primordius' giant black head. Then, using the power of divinity and power of grand mist, Lin Ming slowly stimulated the magic cube's energy, trying to fuse it with Empyrean Primordius' spiritual sea. At this time, Lin Ming could no longer care about hiding the magic cube. And the old god sovereign clearly realized Lin Ming had a soul-related treasure within his body. There exists a treasure that can separate a spiritual sea. The old god sovereign was dumbstruck, but he didn't ask any questions. He naturally realized just how dreadfully valuable such a treasure must be. Lin Ming had far too many secrets on him, enough to leave one numb. The energy gradually penetrated into Empyrean Primordius' giant head. Lin Ming was attempting to use the magic cube to peel away the abyssal demon's soul. As long as he could destroy a part of the abyssal soul mark, then he would be able to slowly awaken Empyrean Primordius memories. The magic cube excelled in erasing spirit marks. But because too much time had passed, the abyssal demon's spirit mark had fused together with Empyrean Primordius. If he wanted to erase the abyssal demon's spirit mark without injuring Empyrean Primordius' soul, that was nearly impossible. Thus, Lin Ming could only disregard any damages that might occur to Empyrean Primordius' soul. He didn't think he could fully awaken Empyrean Primordius, All he needed to do was awaken him a little. Empyrean Primordius' eyes blurred and his vision turned blank. Lin Ming carefully continued, beads of sweat dripping down his forehead. He had to be utterly careful, there could not be a single accident. He knew there wasn't much time left remaining. Facing the wild attacks of famine, the Ark of Hope's energy reserves reduced again and again. As for the violent vibrations of the Ark of Hope, all of that was weakened by the old God Sovereign's energy in order to reduce the impact of the vibrations on Lin Ming as much as possible. Chapter 1908, Love and Pain. Chapter 1908, Love and Pain. A little more, just a little bit more. Lin Ming clenched his teeth, unable to spare any effort to wipe the beads of sweat dripping down his face. In a situation where he was completely disregarding any possible damage he might do to Empyrean Primordius' spiritual sea, he was attempting to awaken those long-slumbering memories. Beneath the shrouding of the magic cube's divine light, a rare brightness appeared in Empyrean Primordius' eyes. However, this clarity appeared for just the briefest moment before they were once again submerged by blood-red light. Two different minds alternated back and forth. Primordius' body violently trembled as a pain swelled up from his soul. Primordius began to struggle. That tough and iron-like body contained an incomprehensible level of strength. For a time, crackling sounds filled the air as the energy shackles that the old God Sovereign placed on Empyrean Primordius to calm him down began to emit breaking sounds, unable to endure the pressure. The old God Sovereign's complexion changed. Lin Ming, be careful. Once Primordius went out of control, the damage would be incalculable. With Lin Ming's current degree of cultivation and bodily defense, Primordius would only need a single strike to disintegrate his body. Lin Ming, draw back, I cannot hold him for much longer. The old God Sovereign's forehead was wet with sweat. However, at this time, Lin Ming's soul force was completely poured into the magic cube as he tried to connect with Empyrean Primordius' spiritual sea. Roar. Primordius howled, the raging sound as turbulent as tsunamis and collapsing mountains. If an ordinary Holy Lord were to face such a roar, then their head would blow up and they would die where they stood. Pang! Empyrean Primordius' upper arm shook. The energy shackles binding him there were torn apart. This process wasn't difficult at all. It was just as if Primordius had broken a little branch in half. The old God Sovereign paled. Without caring for anything else, he grabbed Lin Ming's shoulder and released his protective power of divinity to the limit. He was ready to pull Lin Ming back at full speed the moment Primordius went berserk. It was not easy for Lin Ming to awaken Primordius consciousness. This was because stripping away parts of an individual's psyche would inevitably cause agonizing pain to the soul, enough to make Primordius lose all control. Roar. Empyrean Primordius wildly howled. A terrifying energy storm struck the old God Sovereign's protective true essence, causing his clothes to recklessly flutter in the air and his white hair to blow backwards. At this moment, something appeared and began to emit a dim blue light in front of the old God Sovereign. This blue light was soft and inconspicuous. In the wild energy storm it was nearly undetectable. However, the moment that this faint blue light reflected in Empyrean Primordius' brutal eyes, his body suddenly shook and he instantly calmed down. This blue light was misty, as if it were the only one of its kind in the world. It slowly floated out from the old God Sovereign's chest, drifting towards Empyrean Primordius. As Lin Ming and the old God Sovereign saw this, they were both left bewildered. This blue light was the Chain of Calamity. The Chain of Calamity was a true divinity spirit treasure used in opening the Azura Forbidden Land. The body of it had once been worn by Heavenly Empress Xuanxing, and after she died, the Chain of Calamity was entombed with her. When Lin Ming stumbled his way into her tomb, that was when he had taken it. Could it be? Lin Ming held his breath. He looked helplessly on as more and more blue light appeared around the Chain of Calamity. This misty blue light eventually faintly gathered into the phantom of a woman. This woman's phantom became more and more clear, nearly seeming as if it would manifest into physical reality. Her appearance was as beautiful as the bright moon and her black hair hung down her back like a waterfall of ink. Her feet were bare. Her skin was glittering and crystalline, as if she were formed from the essence of the stars and moon. Her eyebrows were like a painting and her eyes were as bright as the morning skies. She was a goddess from the highest heavens who had been exiled to the mortal world. Heavenly Empress Xuanqing. Lin Ming was panic-stricken. Apparently just before Heavenly Empress Xuanqing had died, she had sealed away a wisp of her soul in the true divinity spirit treasure that she shared origins with, and had deeply slumbered within it ever since. In truth, let alone a martial artist that was powerful in the aspect of the soul, even for a mortal, after they died, their personal effects might develop a sense of spirituality. At certain times these items might manifest the appearance of their master from before their death. And Heavenly Empress Xuanqing was originally at an extremely high boundary. In addition to this true divinity spirit treasure that surpassed the level of an Empyrean, no one realized that a fraction of her soul was sleeping within the chain of calamity. It was not until a moment ago when Lin Ming attempted to awaken Empyrean Primordius consciousness that the aura released by Empyrean Primordius finally rekindled Heavenly Empress Xuanqing's soul. She already didn't have much life left. To awaken also meant her near demise. Beside Lin Ming, the old god sovereign trembled. From his wizened and disbelieving eyes, tears began to fall. As for Empyrean Primordius, as he saw Heavenly Empress Xuanqing, his body violently shook. Within his eyes, confusion and madness struggled against each other. It was as if he were experiencing an enormous pain, one that was unbearable. Roar! Empyrean Primordius cried out in pain. An energy storm viciously lashed out like a hail of blades. Lin Ming and the old god sovereign paled. This sort of energy storm could instantly kill a holy lord. As for the wisp of Heavenly Empress Xuanqing's soul, she would absolutely not be able to withstand it. However, just as they were about to move, they discovered that the entire storm had completely avoided Heavenly Empress Xuanqing with nothing striking near her. Primordius. Heavenly Empress Xuanqing's eyes revealed a deep sorrow. Her voice was dim, as if her words were an illusion. Gently, she flew toward Empyrean Primordius' side. She slowly reached out a hand and lightly caressed his chest. She was only a soul form and couldn't physically touch anything. But Empyrean Primordius immediately calmed down even more. Within his soul, even if two different consciousnesses were attacking each other as before, causing endless pain to surge within him, Empyrean Primordius still suppressed all of this. His body didn't move even a single inch as he allowed Heavenly Empress Xuanqing to lightly touch him. This was because no matter what he had experienced, no matter what he had become, whether it was in the past or in the future, he could never harm this woman. If you can't remember, then don't think about it. Heavenly Empress Xuanqing whispered, unable to bear the sight before her. To part for 100,000 years and meet once again, things had actually ended up like this. He had turned into a demon, losing his sanity. She had died somewhere else, leaving behind only a wisp of her soul. Even though her pain had reached the pinnacle, she was unable to cry. A soul would not shed tears, but they would feel the limits of pain. They gently supported each other. Even though there was no real physical touch, in this moment their hearts were still connected. This was because, within each other's hearts and minds they had forever marked each other, a brand that would never be forgotten. Empyrean Primordius had already completely settled down. The two different personalities within him were no longer in conflict. Within his eyes, pure brightness showed. He looked at Heavenly Empress Xuanqing, seeming to remember everything. He didn't speak, because after fully becoming an abyssal, it seemed he was unable to say words. Then, he looked at the old god sovereign. The old god sovereign had rivers of tears falling down his face and his lips were quivering. Although Primordius didn't receive an explanation, it was like he already understood everything that had occurred. It had arrived at last, the final moment. The obsessions of his heart would soon be resolved. And, he also saw his most beloved once more. A short happiness. The final brilliance of life. Everything would burn like a meteor through the skies, becoming an instant of magnificent glory. Father. Heavenly Empress Xuanqing turned towards the old god sovereign whose back was hunched over with age. She wanted to cry, but no tears flowed out. The old god sovereign's lips shivered. He wanted to reach out his hand to stroke his daughter's cheek, but he couldn't feel her at all. The old god sovereign deeply sighed. The one in front of him was his daughter that had died 100,000 years ago, as well as his only direct descendant. To the primal god race who rarely had offspring, their children were their everything. His daughter was proud and arrogant and beautiful, and had the life of someone who would step into divinity. But in his old age, when his time was coming to an end, she had already taken a step ahead and silently left him. To the old god sovereign, the magnitude of this attack on his heart could be imagined. There is no time. Heavenly Empress Shenqing shook her head. She seemed to understand just what was happening. She flew away from before the old god sovereign and landed on Empyrean Primordius' solid shoulder. The towering Empyrean Primordius was like a tower of iron, the incarnation of a demon. And above this demon's shoulder was the perfectly beautiful and elegant Heavenly Empress Shenqing. Her grace and presence was like that of an ephemeral fairy. As this image fell into Lin Ming's eyes, it became eternal. The old god sovereign silently took out a god decree. At this time, this black god decree seemed cold and merciless. The old god sovereign's heart bled. If Empyrean Primordius and Heavenly Empress Shenqing had to burn away their lives in battle, then let it be him who personally lit the flame. Facing the old god sovereign, Empyrean Primordius had already composed himself and was calmly waiting for this final battle. At this time, there was a sense of satisfaction in his eyes. In the final moment he was able to reunite with his love. His life would be able to brilliantly burn in the dark before fading. With this, the obsessions and unwillingness he had held onto for 100,000 years had already faded a great deal. Then, he looked at Lin Ming. Empyrean Primordius didn't know just who Lin Ming was, but he could feel his own aura on Lin Ming's body. Without a doubt, Lin Ming was his descendant. He could feel Lin Ming's great strength. Within the body of this youth there seemed to be a true dragon deeply slumbering. This youth's potential was inexhaustible. With such an outstanding person inheriting his final wishes and legacy, even if he were to die in battle he would have no regrets. Empyrean Primordius didn't say anything, but the old god sovereign seemed to understand his thoughts. The old god sovereign began to quietly chant. The Azura heavenly Tao laws started to gather. Beams of divine light shined from the old god sovereign's body. Drops of blood essence seeped out from between the old god sovereign's eyebrows and continuously sank into the god decree. The old god sovereign was burning his own life. The word of faith. He had to pour his life into it to ignite it, and only he was most suited to do so. From his withered body, an incomparable and potent life force began to rise. Vast waves of energy rushed out like a raging river, merging into the God Decree. The God Decree became increasingly bright until it completely burned away, transforming into countless runes that converged into Empyrean Primordius' body. In this moment, Empyrean Primordius felt an infinite strength stir in his body. His massive mortal body grew once more. A terrifying strength percolated within him like a volcano that would erupt at any moment, a strength that could not be suppressed, only release. His eyes blazed with fighting spirit. His senses were as sharp as a savage beast as he rushed out of the spirit ship and locked onto Famine and the Good Fortune Saint Sovereign. Empyrean Primordius had never come into contact with the Good Fortune Saint Sovereign before. But at this time, Empyrean Primordius knew that the Good Fortune Saint Sovereign was his life's greatest enemy. Only one of them could live beneath the heavens. Chapter 1909, Severing the Dragon. Chapter 1909, Severing the Dragon. The Azura decree erupted with black flames that burnt through the underground chamber. This underground chamber of the god race could originally be considered an Empyrean spirit treasure, but even it began to melt away beneath these heated flames. Empyrean Primordius' body was soaked in these flames. His aura began to rapidly climb, soon surpassing the boundaries of an Empyrean. The Azura decree was a beyond divinity level treasure. Using it as a support, a peak Empyrean could easily rise to the level of a true divinity. However, what was difficult was that even a peak Empyrean would find it hard to withstand the strength contained within the word of faith. It was even possible that their body might collapse and explode from the energy, immediately killing them. But Empyrean Primordius was different. The intensity of his mortal body had already far surpassed that of most true divinities. In particular, the raging anger within his heart pushed him to the limits, allowing his strength to reach an inconceivable degree for a short period of time. All of his life potential was erupting. On Empyrean Primordius' shoulder, Heavenly Empress Shenqing turned into a wisp of blue light that sank into his body. In the final moments of their lives, they would be together and die together, never to separate again. An exit tunnel opened up within the spirit ship. Without turning, Empyrean Primordius flew out. From this point on, he was a demon bent on revenge. Bang! Terrifying explosions rocked the vast space. The Ark of Hope was like a little toy that was sent tumbling around. Its protective shield rippled and surged, energy sparks flying. Beneath the continued onslaught of the good fortune Saint Sovereign, the Ark of Hope's energy reserves began to rapidly decline. Lord Patriarch, we only have 50% energy remaining, an Empyrean reported to the Celestial Patriarch. After the old God Sovereign left, the only one who could manage the chaotic situation was the Celestial Patriarch. The Celestial Patriarch's palm was drenched in a cold sweat, but he still calmly directed the room. He could not be flustered. Even if his heart was lost and he was panicking within, on the surface he could not show any hysteria. He didn't know where the old God Sovereign and Lin Ming had gone, nor did he know where they were going. They had already disappeared for a quarter hour. The spirit ship wouldn't be able to last much longer, but at this time, the Celestial Patriarch froze. He looked outside the porthole with utter shock as he watched a towering demon hurtle out from the spirit ship and rush towards the saints. This demon's goal was famine. Although this black demon was massive, compared to the planet-sized famine, it was far too tiny. That is, what is that? This demon was far too fast. Many people found it hard to see its appearance. Was this the old God Sovereign's final trump card? This thought immediately cut through the Celestial Patriarch's mind. But as soon as he thought this, he discovered that the black demon didn't rush towards the good fortune Saint Sovereign but instead impacted towards the Saint race's peak Empyreans. Millimeter? That is. On the side of the saints, the fused being of the good fortune Saint Sovereign and famine was stunned. From this black demon, he could feel the aura of an abyssal. How is this possible? The good fortune Saint Sovereign could hardly believe his own eyes. There had been an abyssal hiding within the god race all this time. Within the 33 heavens, the abyssal demons were a taboo existence. God beasts could be tamed and forced into becoming a peak Empyrean's contract beast, but an abyssal could never be brought to heel. Abyssals were incomparably evil beings. Their wisdom was relatively low and they often relied on their instincts to manage affairs. They were the mortal enemies of all intelligent life forms. Of course, there was always the possibility of something like famine occurring. An abyssal with a high degree of wisdom could establish an equal contract with an intelligent race in order to mutually benefit each other. But these intelligent abyssals were often peak true divinity level existences. The good fortune Saint Sovereign didn't believe that such a powerful abyssal would ally with a declining race like the primal god race. Just what is going on? The good fortune Saint Sovereign hesitated. But at this time, Empyrean Primordius had already rushed towards him with unbelievable speed. You are seeking death. Since this is the case, I will devour you. The good fortune Saint Sovereign coldly sneered. With a thought, a thick dragon tentacle lashed out from the giant body of famine. This dragon whip instantly passed through 10,000 miles of space, striking towards the black demon. The power behind this strike already surpassed the level of an Empyrean. The good fortune Saint Sovereign wanted to cut down this unknown black demon and have it become a part of famine's flesh and blood. Ra! The blood dragon opened its jaws, biting down on Empyrean Primordius. In that instant, Empyrean Primordius' eyes burst out with freezing killing intent. Although his mind was still clear and bright, his eyes had turned blood red. Roar! Empyrean Primordius roared. Without changing direction, he shot towards the maw of that giant blood dragon. Like this, that massive maw would thoroughly swallow Empyrean Primordius. For a time, all of the ancient race martial artists felt their hearts tighten. They didn't know how strong Empyrean Primordius was. The good fortune Saint Sovereign diabolically grinned. But at this time, Empyrean Primordius appeared cold and merciless to the extreme. Ka. With two cracking sounds, two long bone knives shot out from Empyrean Primordius' elbows, stretching out until they became massive crescent moon blades. These blades were 1,000 feet long and glowed with a black divine light. With an unparalleled momentum, he slashed out. Shua! The void shattered. Empyrean Primordius broke into the blood dragon's jaw, his entire body vanishing. However, the moment that the blood dragon closed its jaws, two fierce half-moon bone blades slashed out from the blood dragon's cheeks. Blood sprinkled down as the blades continued downwards, unstoppable. Blood gushed out, dyeing the void red. The red dragon tentacle futilely struggled wildly, but in front of Empyrean Primordius its flesh and blood was no different from tofu. It had no ability to resist Empyrean Primordius' bone blade. Like this, from beginning to end, the thousands of miles-long red dragon was sliced open. What? In that instant, whether it was martial artists from the saints or ancient races, they were all panic-stricken. This demon that had appeared from nowhere had severed one of Famine's tentacles. Before then, only the god decree left behind by the Azura Roadmaster had been able to injure Famine. Just what are you? The good fortune Saint Sovereign's pupils shrank. He could feel a dreadful killing intent from this black demon's eyes, as if they shared some deep and unforgivable grudge. When did he become enemies with an abyssal? Empyrean Primordius didn't speak. On his elbows, those crescent moon blades swung out, causing blood to fly. The entire red dragon tentacle was severed in half by Empyrean Primordius. After being cut from its mother body, the tentacle instantly turned into bloody water in the skies. Then, something shocking occurred. Empyrean Primordius opened his mouth and a terrifying traction vortex appeared, swallowing in all of that blood water. Empyrean Primordius had swallowed Famine's tentacle. Famine was known as the existence that could swallow all, but now its own flesh and blood had been swallowed by Empyrean Primordius. Chapter 1910, Invincible. Chapter 1910, Invincible. Crack Ka. Empyrean Primordius' flesh and blood and meridians began to emit a thunderous clapping sound. After swallowing Famine's flesh and blood, a greater strength was absorbed into his body. Within him, it was like a swelling volcano was rising, about to erupt at any moment. What is that demon? It can even swallow Famine's flesh and blood. Within the Ark of Hope, as the ancient race Empyreans saw the black demon, they were all confused. They didn't know just what plans to make. This black demon has reached the true divinity boundary and can even absorb Famine's flesh and blood to eat as its own energy. This is terrifying, but it is not Famine's match. The celestial patriarch shook his head. After the good fortune Saint Sovereign fused together with Famine, they became a nearly invincible existence. The good fortune Saint Sovereign represented the highest laws and the greatest strength, whereas Famine represented an incomprehensible life force and defensive capability. With the two of them fused together, they had almost no weaknesses. In this situation, the celestial patriarch didn't believe there was an existence capable of killing the good fortune Saint Sovereign. This was what it meant to have an absolute disparity of strength. Ha 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 ha. In the void, the good fortune Saint Sovereign howled with laughter, his cackles resounding through the endless space. I never thought that there would be a monster like you in the primal god race. However, you seem to be relying on some outside power in order to forcefully raise your strength to the level of a true divinity. How can someone like you possibly be my match? In the end, you will become nothing but feed for Famine. As the good fortune Saint Sovereign spoke, red dragon heads burst out from his body. These dragon heads wriggled in space, slowly twisting around. On the surface of these red dragons thick layers of bone armor appeared. The dragons that were made of flesh and blood had now turned into bone dragons. This time, do you think your bone blades will still be useful? A contemptuous smile appeared on the good fortune Saint Sovereign's face. With rolling dragon roars, the 100+ bone dragons rushed towards Empyrean Primordius. Compared to Empyrean Primordius, Famine's body was far too large. Those terrifying bone dragon tentacles could easily pierce through a planet. Bang! Empyrean Primordius suddenly ignited with energy. He turned into a black beam of light that hurtled towards those bone dragons. The bone blades on his elbows slashed out, forming an arc of light that spread for hundreds of thousands of miles. Blood sprayed out and a bone dragon's armor shattered. But in the next moment, two bone dragons took its place, each one rushing towards Empyrean Primordius in a pincer attack. Peng! The void was smashed apart. Empyrean Primordius was sent flying backwards like a meteor, tumbling away for 1,000 miles. However, his mortal body was incredibly solid. Even after being struck backwards, he instantly rose up in space and shot forwards once more. Seeing this, the many ancient race Empyreans on the Ark of Hope felt their hearts skip a beat. At this time, the doors to the main control room opened up and an ashen man with a hunched back walked in, supported by Lin Ming. This old man's face was as wrinkled as a walnut and the sockets of his eyes were pulled in deep. His hair was sparse and his eyes were filthy. His entire body emitted a faint death energy. This old man was the old god sovereign, but currently, his fires of life were waning like a candle in a storm, ready to fade at any moment. Your Majesty, Master, Di Wuhen and the many god race martial artists were shocked and saddened as they saw the appearance of their old god sovereign. Before this, when they saw the demon rush out, they had already guessed that it was related to the old god sovereign. But now it seemed that the old god sovereign really had paid a deep price in order to do this. His life was rapidly reaching its end. There is no need to panic, I'm not dead yet. The old god sovereign calmly said, as if this was a simple and irrelevant matter. When the old god sovereign burned the god decree, he had preserved a tiny bit of his fires of life because he wasn't able to die just yet. He still needed to guide the ancient remnant races to the divine realm. Honorable Master! Di Wuhen fell to his knees. He felt as if a knife was stabbed into his heart and was being twisted around. As Lin Ming stood behind the old god sovereign, he looked at Di Wuhen who was crying tears and deeply empathized with his pain. This was because he understood what Di Wuhen was feeling. Hate. Hate towards himself. Hate towards his own weakness. That black demon is, an Empyrean couldn't help but ask. He was once a proud son of heaven who belonged to the human race. He has already become an abyssal. 100,000 years ago, his name was Empyrean Primordius. The old god sovereign slowly spoke, his voice aged and gravelly. Empyrean Primordius. Hearing this name, many ancient race martial artists were bewildered. They understood this part of history. Empyrean Primordius was a true elite, but what a pity, history never gave him the time to grow. Otherwise, perhaps he might have been the turn this great calamity needed. Of course, that was only a possibility. The fused good fortune Saint Sun and Famine was simply far too powerful. Even if humanity and the god race possessed one or two true divinities, it would still be impossible for them to contend with the saints. We cannot stay. Primordius is not a match for the good fortune Saint Sovereign. The old god sovereign's voice was gloomy. Everyone was silent. They knew that Empyrean Primordius was sacrificing his life to buy time for them and they couldn't allow him to die in vain. Open the energy matrix and pour all of your energy into it. Prepare to break through. The old god sovereign ordered. The Empyreans present were solemn. They were well aware that even with Empyrean Primordius, wanting to break out of this encirclement would be filled with difficulties. This was destined to be a bitter struggle. Ca. A bone dragon tentacle was split in half. Empyrean Primordius was bathed in blood, looking like an ascendant demon. He swallowed Famine's flesh and drank Famine's blood in order to restore his own energy. But compared to Famine with his vast, ocean-like life force, Empyrean Primordius' combat strength was simply too low. Up until now, Famine hadn't weakened at all. As the Celestial Patriarch had said, Famine was a nearly invincible opponent. So, you are not an abyssal, but that body is one that you've seized. The good fortune Saint Sovereign coldly sneered. From Empyrean Primordius' spiritual sea, he could feel an aura different from that of a true abyssal. This was no abyssal, but someone from one of the intelligent races. To seize the body of an abyssal, you've actually caused me to recall someone. 100,000 years ago, there was a human who tried to bite off more than he could chew and attempted to imitate the Asura Road Master by establishing his own samsara heavenly Tao. In the end, his plans were toppled by me, and his grand mist spirit bead was taken by me. He fell into the dark abyss, unable to escape. And if I remember correctly, at the time there had been a woman by his side, one that came from the primal god race. The good fortune Saint Sovereign slowly spoke, a taunting smile on his face. His words were like a knife that cut into Empyrean Primordius' heart. Empyrean Primordius' blood-red eyes burst out with a thick killing intent. However, he didn't lose his reasoning. He hurtled through the starry sky battlefield, dodging the attacks of the red bone dragons. He could already feel that his attacks weren't enough to threaten famine. Thus, he needed to attack the core of famine, the good fortune Saint Sovereign. However, when comparing his strength against the good fortune Saint Sovereign's, even if he reached him, how could he possibly defeat him? You're done for. Standing atop famine's bloody red body, the good fortune Saint Sovereign stretched out his hands. From between his hands, a black vortex appeared. A black sphere slowly manifested in it. This sphere was covered with ancient lines, shining blood red as if they had drunk their fill of blood. Grand Mist Spirit Bead. On the Ark of Hope, Lin Ming's pupils shrank. The item within the good fortune Saint Sovereign was the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. As a true divinity who specialized in body transformation, if the good fortune Saint Sovereign emitted an attack with the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, its might would be unimaginable. Primordius, be careful. The old god Sovereign's heart tightened. Originally, it was already difficult to deal with the fused good fortune Saint Sovereign and famine, but now there was also the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. Empyrean Primordius had suddenly fallen into a life or death predicament. Activate the Ark of Hope's array formation with everything you have. We are breaking out of here. The old god Sovereign commanded. And at this time, black flames lit up all over Empyrean Primordius. In his blood-red eyes, the shadow of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead reflected in his pupils. After 100,000 years, Empyrean Primordius once again saw this divine tool which had brought him to unimaginable heights but had also sent him crashing down. His heart wildly fluctuated. Primordius. I remember this was your name. 100,000 years ago, I wrested the Grand Mist Spirit Bead from your hands. Now, I shall use the Grand Mist Spirit Bead to kill you and bring our story to its end. You once used the Grand Mist Spirit Bead to absorb flesh and blood essence to cultivate your martial artists, so now I shall use the Grand Mist Spirit Bead to absorb your flesh and blood essence. I suppose you can consider this a kind of retributive karma, right? Ha ha ha. Millimeter, you want to run away? To think you can play tricks on me, you still aren't good enough. The good fortune Saint Sovereign's complexion became cold and deadly, murderous intent bursting from his eyes. He discovered that the Ark of Hope was revolving energy within its array formation and was attempting to escape. The truth was that the good fortune Saint Sovereign had already guessed Empyrean Primordius' goal was to delay for time so that the ancient remnant races could flee. How could he allow such a thing to happen? In particular, atop the Ark of Hope there was still Lin Ming, someone he had to kill above all. How naive. My sense has been locked onto you all for this entire time. How could you possibly escape? You will all remain here and the ancient races will forever disappear into history. The good fortune Saint Sovereign's thoughts moved and dozens of transformed bone dragons rushed outward. These bone dragons roared, their bodies like beams of light as they instantly passed through tens of thousands of miles, smashing and grabbing towards the Ark of Hope. Bang! The Ark of Hope violently shook. The hull that was thousands of miles long was tangled by dozens of bone dragons, and at this time, an enchantment appeared from millions of miles away, sealing famine, the good fortune Saint Sovereign, and the Ark of Hope within. This enchantment exuded a grand and violent aura. It was the good fortune Saint Sovereign's good fortune force field. With the good fortune Saint Sovereign blocking out the surrounding space with his own force field and using dozens of bone dragon tentacles to tie down the Ark of Hope, the Ark of Hope was now like a bug caught in a spiderweb, unable to move. The good fortune Saint Sovereign ruthlessly grinned. Although you are only ants, I will not allow you the slightest chance to escape. I will give everything to strangle you all to death and bring this all to an end. Chapter 1911, The Final Counterattack. Chapter 1911, The Final Counterattack. Damn it. On the Ark of Hope, the ancient race Empyreans felt their hearts surge with despair. The bone dragon tentacles shooting out from famine were extremely powerful. Just a single bone dragon couldn't be severed even with the all-out attack of a peak Empyrean. Not just that, but there were dozens of bone dragons tying down the Ark of Hope. It would be impossible to break free. What do we do? The ancient race martial artists were worried. Many people looked towards the old god sovereign. In this critical moment, this old man that was on the verge of death was still the spiritual leader of everyone present. Don't panic. The old god sovereign took a deep breath. At the crux of life and death, the old god sovereign's voice seemed to possess a strange and mesmerizing charm that calmed everyone down. We still have a chance, and it is also our final chance. The old god sovereign took out the final Azura decree, the word of sealing. Of the 3 Azura decrees there was, the offensive word of striking, the supportive word of faith, and the final sealing word of sealing. But sealing. In the minds of those present, the word of sealing was the weakest of the 3 Azura decrees, because it had a weak striking power that could only be used to imprison. By relying on the word of sealing, could they reverse the course of fate? At this time in the void, the good fortune Saint Sovereign had begun his final attack. The Grand Mist Spirit Bead was like a black hole. It floated above the good fortune Saint Sovereign's head, seething with power. The good fortune Saint Sovereign spread his arms, allowing energy to recklessly bathe his body. His long hair flew upwards. On the surface of his body strange curse seals appeared, each curse seal matching those on the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. Primordius, ancient remnant races, allow me to use this Grand Mist Spirit Bead to deliver you all onto the road to hell. The Grand Mist Spirit Bead emitted a misty red light. The void twisted apart as a horrifying suction force gushed outward. Empyrean Primordius howled. On the precipice of life and death, he began to recklessly burn his blood essence. As an abyssal demon and an Empyrean who had opened the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, he possessed an incredibly powerful mortal body. Now that he burnt all his blood essence, the strength that erupted from him could be imagined. Bang! Grand mist energy and the power of an abyssal erupted together. But, in the face of the terrifying aura released by the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, the strength released by Empyrean Primordius was like a firefly to the bright night moon, simply insignificant. In the void, the vortex of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead became increasingly strong. All of the nearby martial artists in space felt this dreadful swallowing force that seemed to pull at their blood essence, wanting to pull out all the blood from their bodies. The Grand Mist Spirit Bead was the divine tool that represented essence. It could swallow flesh and blood, but it wasn't limited to that alone. This was because within the universe, essence, energy, and divine separately represented matter, energy, and the heavenly Tao. As for essence, that corresponded to all matter and physical things in the universe. Now, with the Grand Mist Spirit Bead being used by the good fortune Saint Sovereign, it could swallow all matter of creation. Any strength, any light could not escape this swallowing force. It was like a limitless black hole, possessing a terrifying mystic strength. Parker. The surrounding space shattered in massive tracts. The greatest strength released by Empyrean Primordius was only able to faintly slow the Grand Mist Spirit Bead for a moment before no longer having any effect. We must evacuate. The Saint Empyreans that helped seal off the Ark of Hope were frightened upon seeing the good fortune Saint Sovereign use the power of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. They were scared they would be drawn into that black hole and perish without a trace. It's time. This is our final chance. On the Ark of Hope, the old God Sovereign took out the word of sealing God decree. I will join you. The old celestial patriarch stood up. He could already see that the old God Sovereign planned to sacrifice himself and combust this God decree. But the old God Sovereign himself was insufficient. It's been almost 100 million years. I will accompany you on this final journey. The celestial patriarch smiled as he slowly walked up to the old god sovereign's side. Seeing this, the ancient race powerhouses all looked dispirited. Diwuhen and Tobague shivered. Tears streamed down Smokeless' face. Lin Ming closed his eyes. They all wanted to say something, but in the end they remained quiet. Because at this time, there was no more meaning in saying anything at all. The word of sealing Azura decree slowly flew up between the old god sovereign and the celestial patriarch. The two old men flew up into the void. The celestial patriarch looked at the old god sovereign and said, "When we were young we explored the Primeval Realm ruins together. In our lives, I can't remember the number of times we've battled side by side. Even when we had to fight each other, it was for our own people. However, I've always been slightly worse than you." The old god sovereign shook his head. "It's in the past. Today we shall fight together once more, and it will also be our last time." Speaking here, the two old men smiled, their smiles bright and confident. The god decree glowed brighter and brighter. The old god sovereign closed his eyes, saying, "I'll have to rely on you. I don't have much strength left." "I know." After speaking these words, the two old men that stood at the pinnacle of the ancient races began to combust like two blazing suns. Their life's essence energy continuously streamed out from every pore of their body, merging into the black Azura decree. With every wisp of life essence, the god decree lit up more and more. Slowly, it became blinding. But as for the bodies of the two leaders, they began to stiffen like stone and slowly disintegrate. The black god decree began to expand at an incredible rate. Ancient and plain runes appeared, each one containing a vast and boundless power. A will from a far-off time burst out from the rays of black light. These rays of light brought with them the infinite aura of an Azura war god, possessing the power of a bottomless prison. Space shivered. As the black light spread out, even space seemed to be forcefully sealed away. Light, dust, all matter and energy and even the most root source laws began to freeze solid, becoming like pitch-black ice. This sight left the heart racing. With a rustling sound, the bodies of the two old men collapsed and disintegrated into the air. The last wisps of their boundless life force and essence energy merged into the dazzling God Decree. Bang! The God Decree vanished from sight. Instead, what was left behind was a profound darkness, filled with black tentacles as dark as the void that roiled about, innumerable. These tentacles had trillions of runes shining upon them. They pierced through the void, surging forwards. All of the ancient remnant race martial artists felt their hearts weighed down by sorrow. This was a strike traded for with the lives of the leaders from two different races. The two old leaders no longer needed to command this battle because their mission had been completed. If they could not win this battle, then there was no meaning to exist. And if they could win, then the ancient remnant races would be able to escape even without their guidance, fleeing to open skies. Just die. A cold and cruel smile appeared on the good fortune Saint Sovereign's lips. He pressed his hands forwards, pouring all of his strength into the Grand Mist Spirit Bead. Bang! The power of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead rose once more, completely crushing the defensive barriers that Primordius tried to put up. The black vortex grew larger and larger, eventually turning into a massive 1,000 miles black sphere that could consume all of creation. Energy shock waves spread outwards like tens of thousands of stars exploding together. Like a boiling tide, all nearby planets started to blow apart one at a time. Even many nearby spirit ships began to flee, lest they be sucked into the vortex. The black hole formed by the Grand Mist Spirit Bead would expand without end until it swallowed all. Even the good fortune Saint Sovereign had to consume a tremendous amount of energy in order to use this power that could reverse the heavens and earth. He had to overdraw his strength, and even then he found it difficult to control. But just as Empyrean Primordius was covered by this black hole, a strange and formidable dark strength hurtled out from the Ark of Hope. This dark strength blotted out the heavens, overwhelming the world. It was like a black sun with countless black tentacles spreading out from it. As it appeared, vast tracts of surrounding space were instantly imprisoned. Even pure energy shock waves were frozen solid. Even famine, even the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, everything was tightly wrapped up in this sheer pitch-black darkness. millimeter. This is. The good fortune Saint Sovereign detected that something was wrong. He discovered that this strange pitch-black strength contained an inexplicable divine sealing ability. It was somewhat similar to the Grand Mist Spirit Bead in that it shared characteristics with a black hole, but it was actually different from a black hole. The Grand Mist Spirit Bead was a swallowing power, but this dark strength was a seal. It sealed everything away into a black space, and this space also began to rapidly shrink. Azura Decree. The good fortune Saint Sovereign's heart shook. Such a terrifying strength could only be achieved by an Azura Decree. Although the good fortune Saint Sovereign knew that the primal god race had few god decrees personally drawn up by the Azura Roadmaster, he actually wasn't sure what effects they had or what they were used for. But now, it seemed that the function of this god decree was to create a divine natural space that surpassed the laws of the 33 heavens and sealed away all enemies within. The good fortune Saint Sovereign had already been imprisoned and was unable to dodge at all. And worst of all, even the completely berserk Grand Mist Spirit Bead black hole would be sealed away with him. Damn it all. The good fortune Saint Sovereign finally understood the plan of the ancient remnant races. He was so angry he wanted to smash his feet against a boulder. Break for me. The good fortune Saint Sovereign was incensed. He no longer cared for Empyrean Primordius but instead stimulated the Grand Mist Spirit Bead black hole to its limits in order to break free from this divine natural space. Ka. The black hole and spatial barriers collided together. A terrifying and mind-boggling level of energy erupted. The good fortune Saint Sovereign wanted to forcefully break free from this Azura Decree. For a time, space seemed to be completely swallowed up. Then, from the god decree left behind by the Azura Roadmaster, an unexpected shattering sound rang out, as if it would soon shatter. After the good fortune Saint Sovereign fused together with famine, and also with using the power of the Grand Mist Spirit Bead, he could almost break open an Azura Decree. You want to seal me away? Keep on dreaming. A cruel and merciless light shined in the good fortune Saint Sovereign's eyes. But in the next moment, his complexion changed. He watched helplessly on as a towering black demon hurtled towards him at full speed. Empyrean Primordius was also covered by the word of sealing. When the good fortune Saint Sovereign stimulated the Grand Mist Spirit Bead black hole to its limits in order to break free from the imprisonment of the divine natural space, Empyrean Primordius had also been freed from the shackles of the black hole. Now, this was his chance to rush forwards. Yet this time, his target was no longer famine, but the main body of the good fortune Saint Sovereign. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.